The scene opens at GM Elementary School, classroom 5-1. A voice rings out, declaring that they will wait and see. In front of the camera, the little girl with haunting purple eyes smirks, uttering a threat that she will decide based on the opponent's actions. Just as she finishes her sentence, the cameraman immediately shouts loudly, "Cut," and stops the video. The whole class immediately gathers around, full of praise for Rumin's acting, which is just like actress Jung Hajin in the movie, The Nine-Tailed Fox, even just as bone-chillingly realistic. Her best friend is confident that this short video will also become famous, introducing the little girl as the YouTuber Rumin. Rumin's reputation at school is not small at all. Other classmates all whisper in admiration that she is both beautiful and good at studying. After school, on the way home, a curious friend asks about the next project, and Rumin hesitantly reveals that she wants to reenact a scene from Jung Hajin's debut film. Hearing this, her friends ask in surprise why it is Jung Hajin again, then realize that Rumin seems to extremely love this actress. Rumin smiles with admiration, explaining that because Jung Hajin is the best and most beautiful actress in Korea. This compliment is immediately teased by her friends as being no different from praising herself, making Rumin only laugh it off and brush it away. At the bus stop, her best friend suddenly asks to come to Rumin's house to play because she has never visited before. Rumin's smile freezes for a moment. She quickly makes an excuse to refuse, explaining that her mother does not like having guests over, then quickly offers to treat her friends to Malatang tomorrow with the YouTube salary she just received to make up for it. Just in time, the bus arrives. Rumin hurriedly says goodbye to her two friends, then steps onto the bus. When the bus doors close, the smile on Rumin's lips immediately disappears. She thinks to herself that in the eyes of her friends, she is a perfect child. The bus rolls for a distance, then stops. Rumin quietly steps down alone at another stop. The little girl looks ahead with a serious face, her inner thoughts revealing that but the truth is completely different. Because the place she actually lives is an orphanage, and the fear of being hated by her friends if the truth is exposed keeps haunting her. Rumin imagines the scene of being despised and criticized by her friends, calling her a liar for bragging while being just an orphan. Stepping inside, she politely greets the director and tells herself that she did not intentionally deceive. Everything is just the result of trying to hide her emotional wound. The director excitedly runs over to ask about the new video and the upload time. Rumin calmly replies that she plans to edit and post it tomorrow. She then tells Rumin not to spend wastefully but to save money, but the little girl only thinks to herself that anyway he will only give her a small part and keep most of it. Rumin quietly walks into her room, bitterly accepting that elementary school students cannot set up an account, so the money has to be in the director's name. The train of thought takes the little girl back to a year ago, when all the misfortune began from the moment her mother was diagnosed with cancer. Since then, her father completely changed. He brazenly brought his mistress home and grumpily chased Rumin away so as not to get in the way. And then when her mother passed away, right at the funeral, the people around coldly gossiped about the insurance money of about 30 million won that she left behind. More horrifyingly, her father and his mistress happily celebrated the death of her mother, considering it a perfect arrangement. And then he took her to the Hope orphanage. With a cruel face, he threw a cold command at her, telling her to live here from now on. The car then quickly drives away, leaving Rumin alone, silently standing in front of the unfamiliar gate. Finally, the little girl has been thrown away pitilessly by her own biological father. Standing in the freezing winter weather, the humiliation and despair make Rumin only tremble in silence. Returning to reality, that painful memory has forged a cold look, more determined than ever. With extreme resentment, the little girl silently screams that that person is not worthy of being called a father at all. Her gaze turns toward the poster of a man on the wall, telling herself in her heart that to her, the actor Jung Hajin is the real father. The stream of memory goes back to the first night she arrived at the orphanage. At that time, in extreme loneliness, she accidentally watched a movie on television. That was the blockbuster The Thief, the work that turned Jung Hajin from an unknown actor into a big star. Realizing a startling similarity, Rumin used the image of Jung Hajin to replace her father's cruel words, creating a spiritual support for herself. A ray of hope flashes in the little girl's mind. What if Jung Hajin is really her father? And since that day, in the lonely room, the image of the actor has become the only source of comfort for her. Captivated by Jung Hajin's talent, Rumin also started acting, imitating the roles of her idol. The little girl tells herself that the child of Jung Hajin will surely act well too, so to be worthy of the illusion of being Jung Hajin's daughter, she must become truly excellent. And indeed, her talent has been recognized through countless compliments on the internet. They call her a genius and suspect her of being a professional child actress. Each of those compliments further reinforces Rumin's delusion, making her smile and wonder if Jung Hajin has ever watched her videos and what he would think. She even dreams about a day when the actor will come to find her, emotionally realizing she is his long-lost daughter and wanting to live together with her. But then Rumin laughs it off, brushing away that unrealistic thought because she knows it is impossible. Until one day, under a gloomy sky, an unexpected event happened at school. A strange little girl with thick glasses timidly appears at the classroom door, attracting everyone's attention. Rumin's unfortunate but quiet life is suddenly shattered when she faces the unfamiliar stares of the entire class. Her face panics, having a bad feeling when seeing everyone's attitude. Immediately, her two best friends run over, loudly questioning whether Rumin has lied to them. They continue to criticize, saying that she always acted like a child from a rich family, but the truth is completely different. Faced with Rumin's confusion, a friend immediately pulls out a phone and tells her that they will send her a link to see for herself. As soon as she opens her phone, Rumin's eyes widen in astonishment. On the screen is an accusatory post with the title, "I want to die because of the famous actor Jay," revealing that 12 years ago, the writer's wife had an affair with Jay and gave birth to a child, who is the YouTuber L. Rumin is still bewildered, not understanding what this is to do with her. Until reading further, the post tells that this man forgave his wife and raised L as his biological child. But after his wife died and he went bankrupt, he asked Jay to take back the child, but was ignored. The writer condemns Jay as a scoundrel for abandoning his biological child at an orphanage, while warning everyone not to be fooled by his kind appearance. Under the comment section of the post, netizens quickly piece the events together and assert that the character Jay is Jung Hajin and L is the YouTuber Rumin. Another person even reinforces this by pointing out that Rumi's face looks exactly like the actor Jung Hajin. Rumin is stunned, dumbfounded by those groundless accusations. She thinks to herself whether anyone truly believes in this crazy story. Panic invades her when facing the scrutinizing gazes. Rumin frantically cries out that it is all lies. The little girl defends herself to her friends, asking how they can believe in an absurd story about an affair and blood relationship just because of a similar appearance. Her best friend still maintains a skeptical attitude, questioning back that if so, then why does she live in an orphanage like the rumors say? Rumin confusedly explains that the other person must have misidentified her. She tried her best to protect her friend, but in vain. In panic, she wonders if everything written in the post is a lie, but then painfully realizes that a few details coincide with reality. The little girl desperately asserts that she and Jung Hajin do not have any connection. She is even the result of in vitro fertilization. How could there be a gene mistake? Rumin cries while apologizing for lying about the orphanage, but firmly states that the relationship with Jung Hajin is completely fabricated, leaving her two friends standing there looking at her with inscrutable faces. The phone drops to the floor, leaving a haunting silence. Rumin's gaze is soulless, stunned because she cannot believe people would believe those lies. In panic, the little girl runs headlong out of the classroom, leaving the phone lying abandoned. The whispers and gossip about her being Jung Hajin's illegitimate child and living in an orphanage surround her mind. Rumin silently screams in her heart, desperate because everyone believes in these malicious fabrications. She wonders who dared to release such vicious rumors targeting her. Rumin runs along the hallway. The thought that her life is truly ruined makes her tremble. The fear of being hated by everyone chokes her heart. Suddenly, she freezes when she sees a figure blocking the way right in front of the school exit. Before she can react, the stranger man's hand violently grabs her wrist, lowering his voice to call her name threateningly. Rumin is stunned, her eyes widening in terror as she realizes she has fallen into the trap of that terrible man. Seeing the distorted face of the man, Rumin dumbfoundedly realizes that it is the father who abandoned her. Rumin astonishingly cries out, calling him father, wondering in her heart why his face has become so scary and different like this. Before the little girl can compose herself, the man brutally drags Rumin into the car, despite her repeatedly asking where he is taking her. Rumin struggles in vain, fear overwhelming her when seeing his arms full of bruises. Rumin screams in anger, declaring that she will go see Jung Hajin to perform a paternity test immediately. He continues to interrogate whether it was Rumin herself who wrote that accusatory post, why she did such things. The father frantically questions what she is talking about, while Rumin screams demanding him to stop teasing her. Rumin is choked with emotion, asserting he is a liar because her mother used to say she could not get pregnant and had to undergo in vitro fertilization. The man roars in fury, forcing her to stop playing tricks on him, then poses the question of why her appearance looks so much like Jung Hajin and accuses her of conspiring to deceive him. The man is confused by her answer, repeating the skeptical question of what crazy things she is talking about. The father's madness does not stop there as he suddenly reveals a drawer full of suspicious syringes, making Rumin tremble beyond words. He screams in fury, blaming Rumin's mother and the actor Jung Hajin for pushing him to a miserable dead end. Rumin screams in terror as he loses control of the steering wheel, her whole body shaking violently inside the swaying car cabin. The car speeds on the street. The car horn blares loudly in chaos within the extremely tense space. Rumin wails, begging him to stop the car, but he still frantically steps on the gas despite the imminent danger. Things get worse when he shouts out that all this disaster stems from the existence of Jung Hajin. In a horrific moment, the car loses control and crashes into a roadside utility pole with a terrible impact force. The airbag deploys, obscuring the view, leaving a ruined scene with the crumpled car pinned tightly against the pillar. Inside the car cabin, Rumin and the father lie motionless. Blood from the wound on her head oozes out, soaking the dim space. Rumin's eyes gradually close. Her breath becomes weak in the moment on the borderline between life and death. In the blurry moment between the boundary of life and death, Rumin wondered if her life would end this way. The little girl's eyes slowly closed, gradually sinking into endless darkness after the horrific accident. But then, someone's continuous calling echoed, waking Rumin from her deep sleep. She opened her eyes wide, shocked to realize she had woken up in a completely unfamiliar space. A doctor approached, anxiously asking if she could see them while a strange man stood right next to him. Rumin looked around and was stunned to realize she was lying on a hospital bed with an IV drip next to her. The tall figure of the man standing by the bed left her dumbfounded. When the man turned around, his face became clear, causing Rumin to shockingly blurt out the name of actor Jung Hajin. The girl tremblingly asked again if all of this was just a dream. Jung Hajin calmly replied that this was absolutely not a dream, while the doctor stood observing the patient's condition. Waking up from her coma, Rumin stared blankly into space, her heart filled with confusion. Before her eyes was the familiar face of her dream idol, the person she had always admired. Rumin was stunned, feeling as if she were still lost in a beautiful dream with Jung Hajin standing right in front of her. She looked at him blankly, her mind still unable to believe the truth present before her eyes. Jung Hajin calmly confirmed that this was absolutely not a dream and that he was really here. In the hospital room, Jung Hajin and the doctor stood nearby, together witnessing Rumin just waking up after the accident. Rumin hastily blurted out an apology for the trouble that the bizarre online post about him had caused. She repeatedly asked if he had read the post claiming he was her biological father. Jung Hajin looked at her with a stern expression, then suddenly confirmed it was true, and she was indeed his biological daughter. The shocking truth left Rumin astounded. She widened her eyes in astonishment, completely disbelieving what she had just heard. Jung Hajin calmly explained that he had conducted a DNA test while she was sleeping, and the results were confirmed. Rumin was extremely bewildered, stammering to ask what about her mother then. But Jung Hajin firmly asserted that he had never met her mother in his entire life. This made Rumin panic even more, and she yelled out asking how she could be his daughter then. Jung Hajin just calmly revealed that the reason behind it all was due to sperm donation. Rumin was dead silent. She couldn't believe her ears as she repeated the words sperm donation in extreme shock. She naively asked again to make sure it was the exact kind of sperm she was thinking about. The doctor standing nearby immediately explained that because her adoptive father was infertile, her mother had gone to a sperm bank for treatment. Memories flooded back of when her adoptive father said her mother couldn't get pregnant, so she was born via in vitro fertilization, but she never expected the truth was that her father had no sperm. The doctor continued to reveal that during his time as a medical student, his older brother, Jung Hajin, had donated sperm, and it was used by her mother. Dr. Wu Jin added that because donated sperm was so scarce, causing infertile couples to suffer greatly, he had asked his brother to donate. After explaining the origin of the situation, the doctor smiled and introduced himself as Jung Wu Jin, Jung Hajin's younger brother, and also Lumin's uncle. Lumin sat in a daze, trying to process the massive amount of information, and awkwardly greeted this newly found uncle. She looked up at Jung Hajin with her eyes wide open in amazement, her mind still unable to calm down. Silence enveloped the room as Jung Hajin turned his face away, avoiding the girl's bewildered gaze. Dr. Wu Jin smiled with relief, seemingly having anticipated both of their reactions to this shocking truth. He quickly spoke up to break the tense atmosphere, stating that her adoptive father was currently being treated at the hospital for his injuries and suggested discussing this matter more thoroughly later. Lumin was confused, wondering what on earth was going on and if there was anything else hard to say. She secretly thought she might find clues if she checked her phone. Thinking so, Lumin hesitantly asked the doctor if he knew where her phone was. Dr. Wu Jin touched his pocket, smiling as he replied that her homeroom teacher had brought the phone while she was sleeping because she had left it in the classroom. Dr. Wu Jin kindly handed the phone to Lumin, giving a gentle smile, while Jung Hajin still maintained a cold expression. Lumin carefully received the phone with both hands, obediently thanking the doctor. Seeing the girl was fully awake, Jung Hajin hastily announced that he had to leave immediately. Lumin was bewildered by Jung Hajin's sudden departure, and Dr. Wu Jin called after him, pressing to ask if he didn't want to stay and chat more with the girl. Dr. Wu Jin turned to comfort Lumin, promising that he would return to visit her soon, and quickly left the hospital room. Lumin quietly watched the silhouettes of the two people who had just left, the room becoming empty and dead silent. A moment later, the little girl slowly turned her face away, her eyes carrying an unusually strong determination. Lumin suddenly grabbed her face tightly with both hands, her eyes lighting up with extreme excitement. Unable to believe she was really Jung Hajin's daughter, she screamed in delight, bursting with happiness as what seemed like merely an illusion had now become reality. Lumin's imagination began to fly, wondering if she should call Jung Hajin Dad right now, and dreaming about the prospect of the father and daughter living together after she is discharged from the hospital, while telling herself that the father who previously abandoned her only did so because she wasn't his biological child. Lumin breathed a sigh of relief, comforting herself that fortunately she was not abandoned because she had done something wrong. Happiness surging, the little girl dreamed of a bright future where she would live happily beside her real biological father. At the Korean Hospital Medical Center, the clear blue sky seemed to signal a new beginning. Sitting on the hospital bed, Lumin quietly picked up her phone and began searching for information about the incident. The girl intently scrolled through the news feeds, trying to piece together the whole truth. A series of sensational headlines appeared, exposing that her adoptive father was an addict who had blackmailed Jung Hajin, and revealing the truth about the past sperm donation. Lumin was stunned to realize her adoptive father had blackmailed Jung Hajin, and because his demands were not met, he had posted those defamatory articles. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind, wondering if this meant her adoptive father would have to go to prison. A complex gleam flashed through the girl's eyes, then quickly became cold and resolute. Bowing her head, she told herself that now, that man had become someone completely unrelated to her, and anyway, he was never her biological father. Lumin secretly told herself that she shouldn't sink deeply into negative thoughts about what had happened anymore. The girl felt restless and uncomfortable, so she decided to leave the stuffy hospital bed to take a short walk to clear her mind. No sooner said than done. The little girl gently placed her feet on the floor and slowly walked towards the closed hospital room door. As soon as she opened the door and stepped outside, Lumin immediately halted due to an oppressive presence right in the hallway. Striking her eyes was the tall figure of a man neatly dressed in a black suit, standing guard extremely seriously. The man, whom Lumin guessed was a bodyguard, immediately spoke up to ask where she was going, making her confusedly reply that she just wanted to take a short walk. The bodyguard, wearing black sunglasses, coldly instructed her not to go too far or move to other floors, but still allowed her to walk around. Lumin quietly walked away, but couldn't help feeling anxious in her heart upon realizing that their sharp, cold eyes remained glued to her without leaving. The girl began to feel a bit strange when an entire long hospital corridor was so quiet that there seemed to be no one around. Her footsteps stopped at a deserted rest area, secretly wondering about the luxurious and mysterious isolation of the place where she was being cared for. Lumin stood quietly nestled by the door frame, her curious eyes following the tense conversation between the two men out on the balcony. The little girl secretly wondered why actor Jung Hajin was arguing so fiercely with the doctor. On the opposite side, Dr. Woo Jin angrily shouted, questioning his older brother whether he still had any humanity left when intending to throw away the child. The only response was Jung Hajin's cold indifference, as he asserted that he had no legal obligation to raise a child born from a sperm donation. Faced with that resolute attitude of denying responsibility, Dr. Woo Jin could only stand rooted to the spot, looking at his brother with eyes full of disappointment mixed with shock. A heavy sigh escaped from the doctor's chest, his helplessness clearly showing behind his plain glasses upon witnessing his brother's heartlessness. He tried to persuade Jung Hajin to reconsider, reminding him that with his current fame, he could almost never date or marry normally anymore. Standing before his brother, who was drowning in loneliness, Woo Jin sincerely asked if having a biological child by his side wouldn't be warmer than having to live all alone for the rest of his life. Jung Hajin wearily raised his hand to cover his face, affirming in a low, harsh voice that he never intended to have children, and this was absolutely not his responsibility. Too outraged by that stubbornness and coldness, Dr. Woo Jin could only helplessly scream out his brother's name into the deep blue sky. Jung Hajin frowned in contemplation, his eyes clearly showing complexity after hearing his younger brother's passionate words of persuasion. Meanwhile, Lumin stood in a daze behind the glass door, accidentally becoming the witness to all the heartlessness of her biological father. Discovering the girl's presence, Dr. Woo Jin panicked and called Lumin's name with an extremely bewildered and worried expression. A choked voice apologizing echoed down the deserted corridor, like an effort to heal the emotional wounds for the poor little girl. Back in the hospital room, the doctor sat down beside her and compassionately asked if she must be feeling deeply heartbroken. He advised Lumin not to worry too much because Jung Hajin was just temporarily confused, while guaranteeing that he would find every way to change the situation. Looking at Woo Jin's gentle face, Lumin secretly felt a rare warmth from the uncle she had just been reunited with. Although feeling a bit calmer thanks to that comfort, loneliness and disappointment still continued to envelop the little girl's mind. She could not erase the image of Jung Hajin with an ironclad expression declaring he would never take responsibility for raising her. The cold assertion about never intending to have children from her idle father kept echoing forever, squeezing Lumin's little heart. Lumin lay blankly on the hospital bed, her reason bitterly admitting that Jung Hajin was right since her existence was not inherently his responsibility. Even so, when looking out the sun-drenched window, the desire to call that man father still smoldered in the little girl's heart. Under the brilliant sunset sky, she secretly wished that one day she would receive sincere love from him. 1 month later, the setting shifted to a high-rise luxury apartment building amidst clear blue weather, marking a new turning point. Lumin was discharged from the hospital earlier than expected and was brought to the front of apartment 1201, where she would begin a new life with her relatives. Dr. Woo Jin excitedly threw his hands up in welcome, showing off to Lumin the bedroom filled with pink hues and teddy bears that he had prepared. The little girl walked into the beautiful space in amazement, hearing her uncle introduce that this was her very own world from now on. Woo Jin revealed that he had asked many people for help decorating and hoped the girl would like it, making Lumin burst with happiness, praising the room for being so clean and beautiful. Secretly hoping in her heart to live happily with her father, The little girl nodded in agreement when Uncle Woo Jin promised to stay by her side until she got used to the new environment. Looking at the silhouette of Jung Hajin silently reading documents in the living room, Rumin secretly thought that perhaps Uncle Woo Jin's efforts to persuade him were the reason she was allowed to stay here. One way or another, Rumin realized her life had truly turned a new page alongside her newly found relatives. And finally, the little girl had officially begun living under the same roof with actor Jung Hajin. That morning, Uncle Woo Jin hurriedly prepared for work and regretfully said he could only drop by for a moment, making Rumin feel a bit disappointed. Before walking out the door, the doctor kindly instructed the little girl to notify him immediately if that father was being difficult, while she obediently wished her uncle a good day at work. The slamming of the door left behind a suffocating and incredibly awkward atmosphere, as now only the father and daughter remained in the house. A silence enveloped the entire room. Both stood motionless like strangers trying to figure out how to strike up a conversation with each other. That was the first time Rumin was truly alone with Jung Hajin in an enclosed space since the day she woke up in the hospital. The little girl slowly walked toward the living room where her father was engrossed in reading documents, gathering all her courage to break the terrifying silence. With a flushed, embarrassed face, Rumin took a risk and asked if he had ever happened to see any of her YouTube videos. She excitedly revealed that she was the YouTuber Rumin and asserted that she was also quite famous, her eyes sparkling as she waited for comment from her star father. Rumin shyly asked if Jung Hajin wanted to see her act out a scene imitating him. In response to that eagerness was Hajin's cold expression as he told her not to make useless efforts because it wouldn't change anything. The harsh words left Rumin astounded. She stood rooted to the spot, looking at her biological father with eyes full of hurt. Hajin wearily explained that bringing her home was only due to Woo Jin's insistence, and he didn't want to play the role of a real father at all. He asserted that he would only be her legal guardian on paper and provide financial support for the girl. With a sharp, cold gaze, he warned Rumin never to hope to receive any warmth or affection from him. Then he turned and walked away, leaving behind a heartless remark that being a father was too much for him. The slamming door was like a knife cutting into Rumin's heart, leaving the little girl all alone in the vast room. The bitter reminder not to expect kindness kept echoing in her mind, making the little girl sink into melancholy. A tear silently fell, ending the fragile hopes of a happy family that had just been kindled. Rumin drowned in heart-wrenching pain, her sorrowful eyes seemingly reflecting the entire shattering of her happy illusions. Suddenly the room door swung open decisively, shattering the quiet space and pulling the little girl back to harsh reality. She was startled and looked up, her eyes wide with shock at the sudden, cold appearance of her star father. Jung Hajin apathetically announced that he was heading to the film set right now and demanded that Rumin absolutely stay put at home. Finishing his words, he nonchalantly turned and walked away, leaving behind a tall silhouette that was suffocatingly distant. As the image of her biological father shrank in her pupils, the fear of being abandoned once again made Rumin unable to hold back her emotions. In the decisive moment, her small, trembling hands reached out, gathering all her courage to tightly grab the hem of his black jacket. Rumin tried to hold back the footsteps of the man who wanted to shake her off, a painfully pleading action. Bowing her head to hide her weakness, she muttered a plea for him to allow her to tag along to the film set. In response to that earnestness was only Hajin's irritated gaze as he asked in a harsh tone whether she truly understood the heartless words he had just said. Rumin still held tightly onto his jacket, desperately reminding him that he had promised to be her guardian and that her dream was to become an actress. Responding to that expectation was Hajin's apathetic gaze along with a curt question, asking her what that had to do with him. The little girl didn't let go, arguing that since he was her guardian, he also had a responsibility to support her in education and learning. In a wave of emotion, Rumin shouted that going to the film set would help her learn a lot, and that was the bare minimum he could do to help her. The unexpected fierceness from a child left the star father momentarily stunned, his eyes revealing a look of surprise mixed with confusion. The little girl's eyes burned with fierce conviction, secretly determined to hold on until the end to achieve her goal. The scene shifted to the image of a white van rolling along a mountain road shaded by green trees. Inside the car, Rumin sat quietly, her small face clearly showing nervousness mixed with seriousness, as she was about to touch her dream. The image of the little girl screaming for help at home flashed back, emphasizing that this was the result of a tough struggle. She secretly breathed a sigh of relief because she originally thought her request would go nowhere, but ultimately her stubbornness brought victory. Inside the vehicle, Rumin secretly felt relieved and grateful that they had finally agreed to let her tag along to the film set. Sneaking a glance at her highly focused father, the little girl reassured herself that perhaps Jung Hajin didn't hate her like she had feared. As the car rolled along, Rumin secretly kindled a bit of fragile hope about receiving more attention from him. Setting foot on the Gumho Jangseong film set, the little girl couldn't hide her excitement and radiance upon witnessing the massive scale of the place where her father worked. The film crew quickly spotted the actor's presence and warmly gathered around to welcome the star of the movie. Everyone's eyes soon shifted to the little girl accompanying him, causing Rumin to timidly say hello as they curiously confirmed her identity. The entire crew was astounded by this striking resemblance between the father and daughter, and someone even joked that they looked more like siblings because Hajin was so youthful. However, Jung Hajin suddenly showed clear annoyance, his eyes becoming sharp and distant at those comments about their father-daughter relationship. The actor's sudden grumpy attitude left all the staff present astounded and falling into a dead silence. A suffocatingly silent atmosphere enveloped the film set, as Hajin's heartlessness was once again clearly exposed before everyone's eyes. Rumin anxiously looked after Jung Hajin, secretly wondering if her star father truly hated being commented on by everyone that the two of them looked so much alike. Despite the gossip, Jung Hajin nonchalantly strode after the film crew, leaving Rumin standing forlornly in the midst of the vast and unfamiliar space. A member of the film crew approached the little girl, his eyes clearly showing concern upon seeing her standing quietly by herself. The man scratched his head awkwardly, wondering what he should let Rumin do to pass the time while the adults were busily preparing for the next scene. Rumin's eyes were tinged with sadness. The little girl secretly felt lost and lonely in the midst of this glamorous place that completely lacked her father's attention. After a moment of hesitation, the little girl timidly looked up at the staff member and softly asked if she could stand and watch everyone film. The man reluctantly explained that the shoot would not be able to start immediately, and the little girl would have to patiently wait for a rather long time. He expressed regret that because of the busy schedule he could not take her on a tour, while also worrying that letting her wander around alone would get him reprimanded by his superiors. Recognizing the other person's awkwardness, Rumin smartly offered to borrow the movie script to read, leaving the staff member extremely surprised and appreciative of her mature understanding. Meanwhile, the van still sat quietly parked in the yard as a testament to the little girl's perseverance on her very first day setting foot on the film set. The staff member handed the script to Rumin and told the little girl to stay put inside the car to read, absolutely forbidding her from wandering outside. Rumin hastily nodded as she took it, then earnestly asked him to call her out to watch when the shoot started, which the staff member cheerfully agreed to. Immediately after, the sliding car door slammed shut, creating an absolute private and quiet space for the little girl inside. Sitting alone inside the spacious vehicle, Rumin excitedly flipped open the script of the hit movie titled Gumho Jangseong Season 2. The cover clearly showed information about the third episode, opening up an attractive story about a mysterious fantasy world. Set during the Japanese occupation period, the plot revolved around the case-solving journey of the nine-tailed fox Jaho, played by none other than her father. Rumin intently read every detail, secretly curious about the continuation of the story after the main character was painfully betrayed in the previous part. The little girl's eyes lit up with excitement when she discovered that this part included scenes of Jaho's childhood, secretly convinced that the movie would be very successful. The little girl was completely immersed in every line of dialogue, her mind seemingly detached from reality to merge into the world of words. A radiant and undisguised smile of happiness spread across Rumin's lips as the little girl got to indulge in her passion for acting. Tormenting herself, Rumin secretly thought the script she was holding in her hands would eventually become a work of art through the embodiment of real actors. Curling up in a corner, the little girl excitedly considered herself no different from a professional actress as she enthusiastically studied the script. The eagerness to witness the filming process with her own eyes surged intensely, causing the little girl to repeatedly press the script against her face to hide her excitement. Curiosity urged her to turn every page, putting all her focus on the content of the story inside the deserted vehicle. While reading, the little girl muttered every line of dialogue, completely absorbed in the dramatic developments of the movie. Rumin's eyes clearly showed attentiveness and passion, as if she were truly living alongside the characters in every scene. Suddenly, the little girl startled in panic, her eyes widening in bewilderment as she looked away from the pages. Looking out the car window, she was shocked to realize that the surrounding space had already completely plunged into darkness at some point. Rumin gasped in astonishment upon seeing the sky dyed in a brilliant sunset, signaling that a long day had passed. She hastily pushed open the car door and rushed out, running frantically on the sidewalk, secretly blaming herself for being so engrossed that she forgot about the time for a whole 5 hours like that. Rumin ran quickly toward the outdoor filming area of the set, hurriedly approaching where the staff members were gathered. The little girl anxiously asked the manager about the status of the shoot, but only received a hesitant reply that everything had finished a long time ago. Feeling wronged, Rumin loudly reproached the manager for breaking his promise to call her out to watch, leaving him only able to awkwardly apologize for accidentally forgetting. The shock left the little girl stunned, her mind continuously repeating her own assertive words to Jung Hajin earlier about how coming to the set would help a lot with her learning. Bitterness surged as she realized she had made a huge fuss just to tag along, but in the end was forgotten in some remote corner during the entire time they were filming. Rumin secretly feared that now, in her star father's eyes, she was just an impulsive child craving attention rather than being serious about her passion for acting. The surrounding negative thoughts drove the little girl to deeper despair, firmly believing that after this incident, he would permanently forbid her from ever setting foot here again. Utter disappointment made Rumin lower her face, her lifelessly wide-open eyes reflecting the deep hurt tearing her heart apart. Suddenly, a panicked shout echoed from behind asking what had just happened, making Rumin startle and spin around. Right before her eyes, a man was clutching his chest tightly, gasping for breath with difficulty as if he had suddenly fallen into an extreme panic attack. Unexpectedly, an elderly man suddenly suffered a heart attack and collapsed in the yard, causing the surrounding people to panic and scream, trying to find help. Rumin stood paralyzed, watching in terror as the man lay gasping on the ground while clutching his chest, not yet understanding what was going on. Everyone hurriedly called for an ambulance and tried to perform first aid, while a staff member frantically announced that the film crew's child actor had also just fainted. Bad news hitting one after another left Jung Hajin standing frozen, his face pale with tension as he helplessly watched the chaotic scene before his eyes. The director frantically clutched his head and tore at his hair, despairingly crying out that the shoot would be cancelled and all their efforts would go down the drain. In the heat of the moment, he suddenly turned around and tightly grabbed Rumin's hand, his eyes gleaming with an urgent ray of hope as he asked the little girl if she could help him stand in for the child actor's role. The director pleaded with Rumin to say yes, asserting that the little girl was the only one who could salvage this critical situation. Rumin did not hesitate at all. Her steadfast gaze looked straight at the director as she nodded in agreement decisively. The little girl's determination left the director thoroughly astonished, his eyes widening in disbelief at that swift response. He jumped up in joy and hurriedly urged the staff to bring the script to the little girl, while Rumin calmly replied that she had already read and memorized every single line of dialogue. Murmurs of admiration echoed continuously as the film crew wondered in amazement how such an adorable child could exist, hurriedly urging each other to take her to makeup immediately. As soon as she put on the historical costume, Rumin stunned everyone, with people commenting that she looked exactly like a mini version of Jaho, even a perfect clone of the female lead Jung Hajin. In the dressing room, all the final preparations were finally complete, and the staff excitedly announced that everything was ready to begin the important shoot. The two actresses smiled and waved goodbye, not forgetting to offer Rumin words of encouragement and reminding her to try her best out there. The professional camera lenses began to start up, slowly lowering their point of view to prepare to capture the girl's very first footage on the brilliant set. Standing in the middle of the elaborately designed set, Rumin nervously thought to herself that she had truly stepped into a professional recording session. The overwhelming sense of pressure made her instinctively swallow hard, her eyes clearly showing anxiety as she realized all attention was focused on her. Rumin quietly observed the bustling activity around her, secretly feeling the heat from the lighting equipment and the high concentration of the production crew. Suddenly, the man wearing glasses rushed over and grabbed her shoulders, his eyes shining with excitement as he greeted the child in an extremely eager tone. Seeing the other person's bright eyes that seemed to emit an aura, Rumin could only stand frozen in her tracks, secretly feeling incredibly pressured and overwhelmed by such excessive enthusiasm. The director constantly reassured Rumin that she did not need to act perfectly or feel pressured, because the audience is usually very forgiving toward child actors. He excitedly brought up her past acting experience on YouTube and advised her to just treat this like a normal video shoot. Hearing this, Rumin was stunned for a moment, her eyes widening in amazement at the other person's rapid-fire and deeply trusting proposal. The surprise quickly faded, replaced instead by a confident smile appearing clearly on the girl's delicate face. She gently expressed her gratitude for receiving such enthusiastic support, while the director kept shouting powerful words of cheer. Dressed in the historical costume, Rumin slowly stepped into the center of the set with decisive and firm strides. Her hands instinctively clenched into fists, secretly suppressing her fear to prepare for a breakthrough performance in the first major role of her life. Scene 33 in Episode 3 of the blockbuster Jung Hajin Season 2 was officially filmed at the massive, constructed set. In this segment, the young character Jaho will have to face her mother's corpse and swear to exact a brutal revenge. Standing before the camera, Rumin politely bowed to the entire production crew one last time before completely immersing herself in the character's world. At the Jung Hajin film set, the staff members were bustling around coordinating the actors into their correct positions to prepare for an important scene. Behind the monitor screen, the director and his assistant held their breath as they watched, waiting for an explosion of emotion from the acting genius girl. Rumin, dressed as the young Jaho, stood frozen in her tracks before her mother's corpse, which was covered in a pristine white sheet. The pain of loss began to envelop the space as the girl had to face the brutal reality that her character had permanently lost her mother. Her purple eyes trembled with deep melancholy, and the girl softly uttered a call for her mother in utter despair. At that exact moment, real-life memories suddenly rushed back, blurring the line between the movie and reality as the sound of someone calling her name echoed in her mind. It was the image of her late mother in a patient gown, the one who had once smiled and promised that she would definitely survive to keep protecting the girl. That final warm embrace along with the advice not to worry too much had now become a painfully unfulfilled promise. Her mother's funeral portrait appeared amidst the white flowers, confirming the devastating truth that the girl's most beloved person had truly passed away. Returning to the movie scene, Rumin used the very heartbreaking pain from reality to transform into Jaho, creating a spellbinding performance that left the entire film crew utterly speechless. The clapperboard snapped, signaling the official start of the shoot following the readiness command and a highly decisive action. Standing before the cold body covered in a white sheet, Rumin began to call out for her mother, her voice trembling with such shock as if she could not believe her own eyes. The girl turned around abruptly in a panic, her face turning pale as she realized the horrifying truth unfolding right before her eyes. In her state of shock, she grabbed the man next to her and desperately asked if this was not true, that everything was not supposed to happen like this, right? The sudden shift in her acting style caused the backstage staff to whisper, wondering why the girl did not cry immediately according to the original script. However, it was precisely that suppression and delayed outburst that created a heartbreaking sense of agony, far exceeding what everyone had expected. Rumin shrieked in despair, begging someone to tell her that all of these terrible things were just a lie. The man standing across from her could only look at the girl in silence with a gaze full of heartache and remorse, further intensifying the mournful atmosphere of the scene. Behind the monitor, the director and the production crew were completely captivated, unable to help but exclaim in amazement at the girl's natural talent. Finally, The pain broke out into sobbing tears, and Rumin cried out her mother's name through suffocating gasps, while her hands tightly clutched her chest, which was tightening from the trauma. Rumin struggled frantically as she was held tightly by the man, screaming in sheer hatred that she would find and kill the person who caused her mother's death. Even though the man yelled at her that she was just a small, weak gumaho and demanded that she not waste her life but stay behind, Rumin still did not stop crying and screaming. Jung Hajin stood frozen upon hearing the girl desperately calling her mother's name and receiving the advice to grow up stronger to seek revenge in the future. Rumin's painful screams for her mother echoed through the space, making her tear-stained little face look utterly heartbreaking. The entire film crew seemed to hold their breath, and all backstage staff were frozen in their tracks before the spellbinding performance of the reluctant child actress. The director, wearing glasses, stood stunned behind the camera, his face clearly showing shock as he witnessed the natural talent exploding before his eyes. Right when the lines ended, the director raised his hand high to call a wrap on the segment, unable to hide the excitement clearly visible on his face. He rushed over to the girl, running and calling out loudly with great enthusiasm to quickly express his admiration for the young talent. The director leaned his face in close, questioning in amazement whether it was true that the girl had never participated in any formal acting training before. Rumin's purple eyes still held a lingering trace of melancholy as she gently nodded to confirm the truth amidst the astonishment of the entire production crew. The director excitedly shouted Jung Hajin's name, endlessly praising that this girl was truly an acting genius. The female staff members around also could not hold back their emotions, admitting that when Rumin burst into tears, they too almost shed tears along with her. Everyone agreed that it was by no means easy for a child actor to express such deep emotions, further confirming the girl's natural innate quality. Jung Hajin looked at the small figure, secretly wondering if this talent could go far enough to win the prestigious Haiwo Acting Award. The Haiwo Award was originally the pinnacle of glory in the global cinema industry, and Hajin seemed to see infinite potential in his child. Seeing Hajin being so overly serious, the director teased that he was being a bit too biased just because Rumin was his biological daughter. Hearing the mention of the prestigious Haiwo Award, Rumin was struck with shock, her eyes widening because she never expected to be held in such high regard. The girl self-deprecatingly wondered how she could ever touch the biggest award in the world, while the director explained that it also required a bit of luck. Among the admiring glances of the crowd, Rumin noticed that Jung Hajin's gaze carried a completely different nuance, quiet and full of contemplation. That gaze made the girl feel a strange connection, secretly sensing as though something had just changed inside the heart of the cold father. Jung Hajin curled his lips slightly in thought, secretly wondering if this little daughter of his was silently weighing and measuring her own value. Under the quiet night sky, both father and daughter slowly left the film studio after the stage lights had completely faded. Rumin spoke up hesitantly, sending her sincere thanks to Hajin for not leaving her behind at home, but bringing her along instead. The father's red shoes suddenly stopped short on the ground, creating an atmosphere full of suspense and tension. The girl still quietly walked behind his tall shadow, her heart secretly longing for a closer connection. With his back still turned toward Rumin, he suddenly commanded her that from now on, she should start calling him father. The declaration left Rumin so shocked that she stood frozen in her tracks, her eyes wide open, unable to believe her ears. That night, the M Castle apartment building rose magnificently in the middle of the city, marking an important milestone in the girl's life. Lying alone in the spacious room, the girl tossed and turned awake, silently reflecting on the sudden acceptance from that man. The phrase asking to be called father kept echoing continuously in the quiet space, promising a completely new future for Rumin. Rumin was bewildered by Jung Hajin's dizzying change, given that in the morning he had just drawn a clear line but now he was asking her to call him father. Lying in bed, the girl tossed and turned, thinking to herself that she should be happy, but deep down she knew clearly that this was just a reward for an overly perfect stand-in performance. Hajin's highly doubtful question about whether she had enough talent to touch the prestigious Haiwo Award kept haunting Rumin's mind. The girl softly mumbled the name of the Haiwo Award, a surge of longing mixed with heavy pressure appearing in her purple eyes. Rumin wondered if Jung Hajin would only truly recognize her when she reached the level of a world-class award-winning star. The vision of shattered glory made the girl tremble with fear, secretly understanding that if she did not gain the approval of this celebrity father, then the darkest end would be having to return to the cold Hope orphanage, a prospect that made her heart tighten with terror. Brushing away her tears, Rumin gritted her teeth and promised herself that she would absolutely not let things end so tragically. A powerful wave of willpower burst forth, and the girl made up her mind that this time she would definitely not let her life collapse and lose this precious opportunity. And as expected, the spellbinding performance in Gumaho Jayangseong immediately took the internet by storm, attracting immense public attention. On social media, a series of comments praised Rumin's acting, and many people were even touched by the uncanny resemblance between her and Jung Hajin. At her new school, a crowd of classmates excitedly surrounded Rumin, endlessly gushing about her role and bragging that they had watched that video over and over many times. Standing amidst the admiration of her friends, Rumin smiled brightly, secretly feeling relieved and happy that she was finally accepted by everyone. The school dismissal bell rang cheerfully throughout the school, marking the end of a school day in the bustling atmosphere of the children. Rumin quickly said goodbye to her friend, then walked briskly toward the car that was patiently waiting right by the roadside. The life of a true star gradually became clear now that the girl had her very own personal manager sister close by to pick her up and arrange her schedule. Rumin's face lit up with excitement, her eyes sparkling as if holding thousands of stars before the highly promising changes of the future. Sitting in the quiet car cabin, the girl's heart fluttered slightly as she secretly told herself that she had truly stepped onto the professional acting path. The car stopped in front of the prestigious Barun Acting Academy, which would be the launch pad for her talent to shine even more brilliantly. Even though her heart was still a bit anxious for the first class, Rumin still confidently pushed the door open and walked in with a smile full of determination on her lips. Entering the classroom, Rumin caught sight of a brown-haired girl sitting quietly on a long wooden bench. The moment she saw Rumin's silhouette, that girl immediately brightened up, enthusiastically raising her hand to welcome her with great openness. Rumin smiled slightly in response, her heart secretly relieved by the unexpected friendliness of the new friend. The friend quickly recognized Rumin as the famous child actress from the movie Gumaho Jayangseong and endlessly marveled at her talent with praise. After the highly enthusiastic greeting, the girl excitedly introduced herself, saying her name was Mo Hyori. Hyori did not hesitate to gently pat the empty spot next to her, suggesting that Rumin sit together with her to chat, so it would be less lonely. The friend honestly confessed that she got in here mostly due to luck when someone dropped out halfway through, because the entry standards here were extremely strict. A bright smile was always present on Hyori's lips as she talked about her future plans and her burning passion for the acting profession. The girl cheered in pure excitement, asserting that she herself was feeling incredibly happy just to be present in this place. Witnessing that innocence, Rumin secretly smiled and felt very lucky to start the new environment with such a kind-hearted friend. Rumin and her newly made friends were sitting and chatting animatedly on the long wooden bench, waiting for class to begin. The group gradually grew closer as more new friends excitedly joined the highly lively conversation. In the midst of that, the sound of the door opening softly echoed and a decisive footstep entered, causing the atmosphere to suddenly fall silent. A youthful woman with a dignified demeanor stepped into the room, smiling and sending a warm greeting to all the students. She solemnly announced to the class that today everyone would get to know an extremely special friend. The children's eyes focused on Rumin as the teacher introduced her as the child actress from the movie Jayangseong Gumiho. The teacher told the class to try to learn from Rumin's talent and hoped everyone would live together in perfect harmony. As all the curiosity was reaching its peak, the teacher gently gestured for the class to settle into their positions to begin the first lesson. Suddenly, a boy with highly impressive silver hair appeared right at the doorway, capturing Rumin's entire attention. The new classmate flashed a bright, confident smile, his face lighting up and exuding a special charisma exactly like a true star. Rumin saw Ito, her eyes widening in amazement, secretly admiring that he looked as beautiful as an angel, just as the teacher was reminding him to arrive at school on time. The group gathered around on the wooden bench in the practice room, and Ito smiled and waved at everyone, making the atmosphere friendlier and closer. The teacher's loud voice called out, asking the class to pay attention, and everyone immediately directed their eyes to the board, preparing for the first lesson. The teacher smiled and announced that today the class would practice acting through an exercise expressing emotions via a monologue. Still keeping a bright smile, the teacher began to describe the hypothetical situation. Students would have to act out a scene where their parents or guardians go on a trip and leave them at home alone. Upon hearing the topic, the group listened intently, while Ito nodded slightly, as if he clearly understood the requirements. The teacher continued to explain that each person must imagine a specific circumstance and dialogue for themselves, then act it out using their most genuine emotions. Suddenly, a female student with her hair tied up high volunteered to perform first, confidently stepping out into the middle of the practice room and beginning her performance. Everyone closely watched together, while Ito lowered his head, seemingly hesitant and feeling a bit of difficulty with this exercise. The teacher gently encouraged Ito, softly reminding him that it seemed it was his turn to perform, causing the boy to look up slightly with a hint of embarrassment on his face. When her turn came, Hairi began to immerse herself into the role with a sad expression, asking if her family could bring back a gift for her. Standing before the camera, the girl continued her monologue, wondering about the gift she would receive when they returned. The girl hesitated for a moment, then shouted loudly that the gift was mango. Hairi's face suddenly darkened, and the girl emphasized that the gift she craved most was dried mangoes. Hairi clenched her fists, screaming in utter rage, demanding that her family buy her the dried mangoes she had always dreamed of. The female teacher standing behind the camera smiled gently and began to offer constructive feedback. She praised Hairi for making a great effort to complete the pre-prepared lines completely. However, she also kindly advised that from now on, Hairi should not memorize the script by heart, but should try to act using her real emotions. Hearing the feedback, Hairi nodded slightly in agreement, while the teacher announced that the next person would be the boy Kwon Ito. The camera lens slowly pointed toward Ito, and the boy showed annoyance, grumpily asking why it had to be him. Ito began the exercise with a highly immersed tantrum, rolling on the floor and crying out loud, demanding to go along. Before the refusal of the hypothetical family member, the boy asked back in shock whether he really could not go. Ito continued to explode, screaming to ask why, then immediately shifted to a sharp tone, declaring he did not need any gifts to soothe him. The boy's expression changed rapidly, and he pretended to look bewildered, asking back if they intended to increase his pocket money. The friend curled his lips slightly as if calculating, then put on an arrogant look, saying that he actually was not that enthusiastic about the money either. But then Ito suddenly changed his attitude, triumphantly accepting to stay home alone if his money was increased and plenty of gifts were bought. After a brief pause, Ito stood frozen in his tracks with a calm face, completely stepping out of the noisy state from just a moment ago. The entire classroom sank into silence as the boy stood tall before the camera lens, preparing for the final punchline of the monologue. Rumin sat in a corner observing, unable to help but feel shocked and full of questions at her classmates' flexible psychological transition ability. Instantly, Ito exploded with energy, jumping up and down in pure joy, cheering because he was finally free to do everything he liked all by himself. The teacher endlessly praised the previous performance for being extremely vivid and bringing a sense of reality to a terrifying degree. Then she smiled and announced that the final turn to act would belong to Rumin, causing the girl to feel quite anxious. The friends around simultaneously focused their attention on her, creating an invisible pressure that enveloped the entire practice room. The camera was prepared and ready to capture every most invaluable expression of the celebrity's daughter. Rumin stood firmly on the stage, her purple eyes gradually changing as the girl began to immerse herself into the character's world. The climax was when the girl screamed, demanding the other party not to lie to her for even one more moment, causing all the students sitting below to be stunned by this incredibly intense immersion. Rumin painfully exposed the lie about the vacation trip, bitterly uttering that she knew clearly her mother was having to be hospitalized for surgery. As the girl sobbed, saying she wanted to stay by her mother's side all day long, even the cold Ito had to freeze in amazement. Ending the test, the girl turned her back with her shoulders trembling from the overwhelming pain, leaving a haunting silence for the viewers. Rumin immersed herself in the role spellbindingly, thinking gloomily about how her mother would never utter a single word about that matter again. The pain seemed to tighten even more as the girl choked out that it truly broke her heart. Rumin stood quietly in the middle of the practice room, her lonely silhouette exuding a genuine sadness that forced everyone to hold their breath and watch. The teacher observed in stun, secretly amazed to realize that the girl's ability to master her emotions had reached a supreme level. The teacher silently assessed that Rumin did not let her emotions spill out recklessly, but suppressed them deep inside, an acting technique that even veteran actors take many years of training to acquire. Even though she knew Rumin had actually lost her mother, she still could not believe a child could turn real-life pain into such pinnacle art. The classmates gasped in admiration, and Hairi endlessly praised Rumin's performance for bringing a sense of grief exactly like someone who had just truly lost their closest relative. Amidst the lingering atmosphere, Ito's comment caused the teacher to panic and scold him loudly, warning him not to bring up a painful private life for an insensitive comparison. Yet Ito still smiled brightly, casually revealing that his mother had also passed away in a horrific plane crash with an attitude of indifference bordering on coldness. Rumin stood frozen before her classmates' terrifying nonchalance, her purple eyes full of bewilderment when facing Ito's incomprehensible smile. Rumin was struck with shock at Ito's revelation, her face clearly showing utter confusion after that dialogue just now. In the office, the teacher kindly explained that Ito was not a bad child, even though his actions were a bit excessive at times, and Rumin softly replied that she was fine. Looking at the teacher's forced smile full of anxiety, Rumin secretly sensed the complexity behind her silver-haired classmate's personality. The teacher hesitantly stated that this was a sensitive topic even though the public had actually known it well for a long time. Then she suddenly asked Rumin if she still remembered the catastrophic plane crash that took the life of the youngest daughter-in-law of the Kwansung group. Rumin looked blankly at the teacher, timidly confessing that she herself truly had no knowledge about that shocking event. The teacher sighed, revealing that at that time the children were only 5 years old, so it was understandable not to remember, then asserting that unfortunate woman was indeed Ito's biological mother. With a sorrowful gaze, the teacher hoped Rumin would not mind the boy's mocking attitude, because she knew deep down inside Ito was an unceasing longing for his mother. Rumin sank into silence, her heart tightening slightly as she began to understand the pain that her new friend was trying to hide behind a facade of carelessness. The image of Ito smiling brightly while talking about the plane explosion flashed back in her mind, making Rumin shockingly realize those seemingly joking words were the most painful truth. The teacher smiled and announced an upcoming audition, suggesting whether Rumin would like to try her hand at it. Rumin gasped and widened her eyes, secretly thinking she had only just started her very first class, so she felt immense pressure. Noticing the hesitation, the teacher gently advised the girl to treat it as an experience and reminded her that the registration deadline was tomorrow. Rumin stood dazed in the middle of the office, her purple eyes harboring a sense of determination mixed with vague anxiety about this overwhelming challenge. As dusk fell upon the city, the car carrying Rumin sped down the boulevard as if racing against time. Sitting in the back seat, the girl intently checked the information on her phone, trying to learn more about the new film project. The teacher's words echoed in her mind again, introducing this as a massive historical drama project adapted from a famous literary work, opening up a nostalgic world about the forbidden love between a court maid and an elegant scholar during the Joseon era. Rumin secretly set her goal as the young role of Jaren, the closest friend of the female lead in the film. But then sweat rolled down her forehead as she anxiously admitted she had never tried her hand at the historical genre, which was far different from the modern style she usually acted in. Jung Hajin raised his eyebrows in suspicion upon hearing about an audition, casually assuming it was just a minor role and nothing major. Those words caused Rumin to gasp and widen her eyes, secretly fearing she would fail because this was only her first day of class. Hajin sat leaning on the sofa, firmly asserting that the main child role would definitely belong to the illustrious named Jean Soil. He stated that this heavy opponent was not only the most famous child actress today, but also the exact same age as the girl. Hajin even further revealed that the girl had embarked on the artistic path ever since she was a newborn baby. Rumin looked blankly with a look of skepticism, secretly wondering how a newborn child could possibly display acting skills. Hajin seriously explained that her opponent started from diaper commercials and now possessed skills on par with veteran seniors. Faced with overwhelming pressure, Rumin stood in silence, her small face clearly showing anxiety when having to confront a challenge far beyond her capacity. Hajin suddenly pressed to ask if she had ever acted in a historical piece, and received a timid shake of the head from the girl. He then announced there were only 3 weeks left until the audition and declared he would directly train her during this period of time. An hour passed, and the working space of the father and daughter sank into an extremely tense atmosphere once again. Hajin coldly pushed the tablet toward Rumin, announcing the highly high-pressure training schedule that the girl had to follow. Rumin was struck with shock upon seeing that she only had short resting times reserved for eating and sleeping, secretly screaming in her heart because it was too harsh. Responding to that panic was Hajin's iron gaze as he challenged her that if she was his daughter, she had to handle this amount of work. The girl stood frozen in her tracks, her small face clearly showing utter tension before the high expectations of the celebrity father. Rumin swallowed hard, trying to compose herself so as not to collapse right from the very first moments of the training. A thick stack of documents was slammed down on the table, officially kicking off a grueling 3-week training period. It was a historical drama script with strict requirements regarding language and demeanor that the girl had never encountered before. Hajin explained that historical dialogue was far different from everyday speech, causing Rumin to ask sluggishly whether she really had to read through this entire pile. He casually handed her the original novel and demanded that the girl utilize even her recess times at school to complete the research. Hajin continued to push when handing Rumin a thick stack of books, casually saying that these were just thin books, so the girl would finish them soon. Not only that, he also forced the girl to wear hanbok and strictly corrected even the smallest gestures, demanding Rumin keep her hands perfectly neat and maintain a dignified posture completely different from modern clothing. During practice via screens, Hajin coldly reminded his daughter not to watch mindfully, but to pay meticulous attention to the way the actors use their gaze, breath, and even the invaluable pauses. The horrifying training intensity caused Rumin's face to become expressionless, her purple eyes clearly showing signs of exhaustion, as if all vitality had been completely squeezed out. The girl walked staggeringly, her body broken down and trembling like a machine about to malfunction after days of forced overtraining. Right when she arrived at the door, Rumin collapsed onto the floor in Uncle Woo Jin's utter astonishment and panic. The room door slammed shut behind the girl, leaving Woo Jin standing stunned with a wave of anxiety rushing over his niece's condition. Too furious at his older brother's coldness, Woo Jin rushed straight into the study, shouting to question whether Hajin was actually letting Rumin rest properly. Responding to that anger was Hajin's frighteningly calm attitude, as he placidly asserted he was still ensuring the girl got her 8 hours of sleep every day. Woo Jin furiously slammed his hand down on the table, shouting out in heartache to remind his brother that Rumin was actually just an 11-year-old child. Woo Jin slammed the table and shouted that children at this age need to sleep 9 to 12 hours and forcing Rumin to work was violating her right to health protection. Lying in the dark room, Rumin tossed and turned awake as she accidentally overheard the heated arguments of the two adults about herself. Hajin indifferently requested his younger brother not to overload things, while simultaneously asserting that Rumin had also completely accepted this training schedule. Woo Jin sharply fired back, arguing that exploiting a child's labor was unacceptable and the girl's consent was merely a forced concession. Hajin tiredly rubbed his forehead, explaining that this was just a short-term, harsh training phase rather than an oppression that would last forever. He looked into the space with great strictness, dropping a cold reminder that Rumin was now officially late for her practice hour. Standing before his brother's iron face, Woo Jin could only fall silent upon hearing Hajin assess that compared to today's elite child stars, Rumin was lagging very far behind. Hajin sat contemplatively in his study, continuing to emphasize that while Rumin had not even shaped her path yet, opponents like Jin Soil had been shining before the camera for a long time. Those cruel comparison words surrounded Rumin's mind, causing the girl to stand trembling with her eyes clearly showing extreme tension and pressure. Jung Hajin ended the debate with a sharp, thoughtful gaze, silently observing whether this daughter of his possessed enough competence to reach the pinnacle. Dr. Wu Jin clearly showed tension on his face, looking at his older brother with a gaze full of anxiety, mixed with helplessness. He softly called out Hyung like a plea, hoping the other party would reconsider his harsh decision. Returning to the past, Hajin sat dazed next to the unfinished beer cans, blaming himself that the girl had started way too late and wishing that his past self had initiated earlier. The man accompanying him then comforted him that he was still very young, having just stepped into the highly promising age of 20. But Hajin immediately screamed in utter despair, asserting that everything currently was completely too late to start over. Time flew to the fateful audition day, and the media center building rose majestically under the clear, sunny sky. Right in the waiting lounge, Hajin and his daughter faced the child star Jean Soil, who politely bowed to her senior with a highly dignified demeanor. Looking up with cold gray eyes, Soil flashed a confident smile, exuding the charisma of a genius who had stood before the camera ever since she was in diapers. Hajin's brutal comparison words about how she was being left behind by exceptional children like Soil rushed back into her mind, leaving Rumin shocked, cold sweat trickling down her face as she officially felt the heavy pressure from her ultimate rival. Her father's harsh comparison about her falling behind geniuses like Jean Soil kept echoing in her head, making Rumin inevitably tense. The little girl's purple eyes trembled, cold sweat breaking out as the invisible pressure of being a superstar's daughter began to weigh heavily on her small shoulders. Opposite her, Jean Soil's ash-gray eyes exuded a strangely calm demeanor, the absolute confidence of someone who had stood at the pinnacle since birth. Soil took the initiative to approach with a polite smile, greeting her and stating that she had heard of Rumin's name for a long time. Despite being filled with anxiety, Rumin tried to stay calm to return the greeting, saying that she also knew a lot about the other's fame. The appearance of the film crew staff made the atmosphere even more suffocating when they excitedly asked if both were participating in the Yang spin-off project. Seeing everyone's eager attitude, Rumin bitterly realized that everyone silently assumed the female lead role would definitely belong to the Jean genius. Before leaving, Soil did not forget to leave a meaningful wish, hoping Rumin could pass this arduous audition. The little Jean girl and her manager politely bowed to their seniors and calmly walked away, leaving behind an insurmountable distance right in the waiting hall. The moment their two shadows passed each other, a silent war officially began between a shining star and an ambitious challenger. Jean Soil kept a pensive face, her ash-gray eyes slightly lowered, as if hiding the proud calculation of a top star. Facing that silence, Rumin did not falter either. The little girl's determined purple eyes shone with seriousness to counter the invisible pressure. Suddenly, the corners of Soil's lips curled up into a smug smile, a smirk carrying a discreet challenge for her new opponent. That cryptic expression made Rumin unavoidably stunned, her heart clenching slightly at the terrifying confidence of the Jean genius. Right at that moment, Hajin coldly spoke up, urging Rumin to leave and prepare, leaving behind the newly sparked atmosphere reeking of gunpowder. The father and daughter strode along the quiet corridor of the media center, each footstep carrying expectation and secret anxieties. The destination appearing right before their eyes was the sign announcing the waiting area for child actors participating in the audition for the Yang spin-off project. A pressure-filled scene struck Rumin's eyes as many other children bowed their heads in disappointment, while the parents beside them couldn't hide their exhaustion. Seeing their weariness, Hajin softly deduced that these must definitely be the children who had just finished their tryouts for the main role and were completely drained of energy. Among them, a little girl was clutching her head and sobbing bitterly, desperately screaming that she would definitely fail because the role inherently belonged to Jean Soil by default. The sobbing of a contestant blaming her mother for not warning her that Jean Soil was also participating in the audition made the atmosphere even more tense. Leaving Rumin utterly shocked, she began to clearly feel the terror from the wall named the Jean genius present right here. Soil's arrogant gaze and half-smile continued to haunt her mind, like an affirmation of a different class that Rumin would find hard to reach. Standing in the middle of the spacious corridor, the little girl confusingly asked herself if she truly had enough strength to defeat such a high-caliber and capable opponent. Entering the rules briefing stage, the film crew staff required the contestants to perform the scene of Jaren feeding porridge to Yunying alone without any supporting props. This harsh pantomime challenge forced Rumin to calculate every hand movement precisely so as not to make the performance awkward. When the names of the first contestants were called, the atmosphere in the waiting room suddenly became suffocating and intensely tense. Rumin attentively observed the process of calling groups of 3 to the waiting corridor, silently evaluating the professionalism as well as the competitiveness of the audition. Among dozens of candidates trying their best, she bitterly realized that only the single most outstanding person could win the role of Jaren. Her rising anxiety made Rumin's hands tremble violently. The little girl could only clutch the script tightly to her chest in an attempt to calm her nerves before the deciding moment. Time slowly passed until a staff member spoke up, asking Rumin's group to follow them to start the official audition. Waiting in the quiet corridor, she constantly gripped the script in her hands, feeling that the final deciding moment had finally arrived. The tense atmosphere was suddenly broken when the name Rumin was called out clearly, inviting the little girl to step inside. The audition room door for the Yang spin-off project opened, welcoming Rumin with a vast space carrying suffocating pressure. Standing in the center of the room, the little girl tried to suppress her nervousness to confidently and politely introduce her name and age. Facing Rumin were 3 judges with extremely stern faces, their sharp gazes focused on penetrating all of her potential. The performance began as she sank deeply into the content of the excerpt about Yunying, a child separated from her parents and living like a soulless corpse, while her friend Jaren had to make every effort, even using force, to feed her spoon by spoon to save her friend's fragile life. Rumin stood firm, her demeanor completely changing as she simulated the posture of holding a porridge tray professionally despite not having any supporting props. With a resolute and cold tone, she demanded the other person to eat immediately, officially erupting her top-tier pantomime acting skills. The brilliant performance instantly left the judges astounded, their eyes glued to Rumin's every movement without leaving. In the middle of the large auditorium, the little girl completely mastered the space and turned the dry audition into a mesmerizing stage. Behind the ajar door, Jean Soil silently watched with a changing expression as she realized her opponent's true caliber. Rumin reached out realistically, uttering a sorrowful reproach, asking if the other person truly wanted to abandon themselves to death. Every gesture of holding the spoon to feed the porridge was simulated so delicately that viewers felt as if they were actually seeing the object present before their eyes. Faced with invisible resistance, she decisively voiced her denial and used her small hands to try and hold onto a sliver of fragile hope. Standing before an exhausted Yunying, Rumin affirmed that she would never stand idly by and watch her friend fade away like that. Her purple eyes burning with an intense will, the little girl compressed all of the character Jaren's determination into every sharp gaze. Anxiety surged as Rumin earnestly fed each spoonful of porridge, trying to hold back the last bit of vitality for her fellow friend in adversity. The decisive action of forced feeding concluded the performance, leaving a haunting and admiring silence for the entire judging panel. Rumin channeled all her strength into her hands, performing the forced porridge feeding motion, creating an incredibly dramatic scene. The little girl's eyes burned with indignation mixed with sorrow, a sharp expression that made anyone witnessing it shiver. A decisive motion pushed the spoonful of porridge into the air, as if actually touching the other person's body, exploding with top-tier physical acting skills. Looking into the boundless void ahead, Rumin bitterly felt the painful connection between the character and her own life. Her deep purple eyes, holding long-standing profound trauma, suddenly burst open, blending perfectly into the soul of the character Jaren. The spoon falling to the floor served as a testament to the abandonments the little girl had experienced far too much in the past. Memories flashed back of her late mother, who forever left her alone in the cold hospital room with a final gentle smile, to the terrible father who heartlessly threw away his own flesh and blood to chase after ruthlessly selfish calculations. And even Jung Hajin, the star father standing in reality, whose coldness and harsh demands made her heart clench even more. The climax of the pain exploded as Rumin screamed, demanding the other person to eat, a desperate effort to grasp life and the world's recognition. Rumin shrieked that the other person had to eat if they wanted to keep living, her purple eyes flashing with an intense, suffocating pressure. The little girl both desperately begged Yunying to cooperate and used force to feed every spoonful of porridge into the mouth of her friend who was giving up. Her gaze suddenly grew sharp, reflecting the long, drawn-out years of having to brace herself to endure all the cruel upheavals of life. Every pantomime gesture was so realistic that the audience could clearly feel the fierce struggle between two souls standing on the edge of the abyss. Despair surged as the other's resistance gradually weakened, pushing the scene's drama to the pinnacle of heartbreak. Rumin gritted her teeth tightly, compressing all the pain of being abandoned in reality into an explosive source of energy for the character Jaren. A heavy, dry swallow marked the moment when resilience temporarily triumphed over her friend's intention to give up on life. Suddenly, the little girl let out a haunting laugh, silently affirming that this was the exact reason she could embody the role so excellently. Rumin boldly declared that suppressing and enduring all grievances had inherently become her innate survival instinct. As soon as the performance ended, the little girl collapsed onto the floor in a state of exhaustion, her body trembling incessantly due to the overwhelmingly realistic obsession. The cameraman froze for a few seconds, completely shocked by the masterful pantomime acting skills of the girl who was only 12 years old. The entire judging panel clearly showed astonishment on their faces, seemingly unable to escape the haunting atmosphere that Rumin had just created. The audition room sank into an admiring silence as the little girl stood perfectly straight before the most powerful judges. Rumin smiled in relief with drops of sweat still lingering on her forehead, clearly announcing that her performance concluded here. Endless words of praise rang out. The judges admitted that they were truly surprised and completely convinced by this outstanding talent. The male judge looked at Rumin thoughtfully, silently assessing that the emotional source hidden inside this little girl was actually exploding in an excessive manner. He silently deduced that if not careful, any co-star acting alongside her would easily be swept away and overshadowed by that fierce current of energy. Standing silently behind the door, Jean Soil stood still with a pale face upon witnessing firsthand the terrifying explosion of a formidable opponent. The gray eyes of the inherently arrogant genius now flashed with a look of shock mixed with a hint of unprecedented fear. However, Soil suddenly broke into a highly excited smile, silently thinking that it was exactly this excellence of Rumin that made the race for the lead role interesting. Just leaving the restroom area, Jung Hajin was blocked by a strange man with an extremely effusive greeting. This person acted extremely close, taking the initiative to reach out his hand with the intention of a friendly, sociable handshake. But Hajin maintained his cold demeanor. He simply stood with his arms crossed and completely ignored the other party's approach. The young star bluntly reminded him that he had said many times how much he absolutely hated handshakes like this. Director Ju Youngtan clicked his tongue softly, mocking Hajin's rigidity even when his daughter was under his management. He continued to question whether Hajin would heartlessly fail Rumin out of personal vendetta right at the moment the little girl was approaching. The sudden appearance and polite greeting of Rumin made the tense argument between the two adults come to an abrupt halt. Director Ju shot a brief, profound glance at Hajin, seemingly looking for a slight change in the cold father's attitude. Standing in the suffocating atmosphere, Rumin couldn't help but look bewildered and felt incredibly confused by the strange relationship between the two. Before turning his back to walk away, Director Ju did not forget to leave a meaningful parting word, promising to see the young father and daughter again soon in the future. At the Barun Acting Academy, Mo Hyri eagerly ran over upon seeing Rumin to ask about the audition results and was curious whether her friend had watched Jean Soil act. Rumin smiled gently, replying that although she couldn't witness her opponent's skills firsthand, she felt her own performance went quite smoothly. Hyri firmly asserted that Rumin would definitely pass, because if someone as excellent as her failed, then no one else would be worthy of that role. The brown-haired friend excitedly revealed further that she had also applied to be an extra for the Yang spin-off project. With dreamy eyes, Hyri hoped that perhaps they both would have the chance to appear together in this hit film project. Despite a bit of melancholy when admitting that an extra role would usually not have a single line of dialogue, Hyri's passion did not diminish at all. The little girl smiled radiantly and silently affirmed that just appearing in the Yang spin-off would already be an incredibly wonderful thing. The cheerful conversation between the two girls was suddenly interrupted when they felt a brilliant aura approaching from behind. It was Kwon Ito, the silver-haired genius, flashing a radiant smile that concealed the absolute confidence of an emerging star. Hearing Hyri naively ask if he was also applying for a supporting role, Ito smirked slightly and asked back if he looked like someone who would only play an extra. Ito boldly declared that he had officially become the child actor taking on the young male lead role for star Kim Siwon. In response to Hyri's wonder about not seeing him at the audition, Ito casually asked back why he had to do such a strenuous task. The boy revealed a powerful truth that his grandfather himself had invested a massive amount of money into the Yang spin-off project in exchange for the male lead role. Witnessing this blatant, backdoor move, Rumin couldn't help but be shocked and silently criticized her friend's habit of relying on wealth to manipulate the entertainment industry. Ito seemed surprised to see the harsh reactions of his two female friends, wondering if they didn't feel happy to be participating in the same project as him. A sly and smug smile clearly appeared on the silver-haired genius's face. He continued to push forward, teasing Rumin that on her first day joining the academy, she couldn't stop staring passionately at his face. The baseless accusation sent Rumin into a rage, and she yelled out a fierce denial while blushing with anger. Ito casually advised her not to be too embarrassed, as he proudly claimed that his both pretty and handsome looks had inherently left countless people mesmerized. Rumin was completely speechless at Ito's peak level of narcissism. The little girl began to wonder if this friend was truly normal in terms of cognition. The sound of the door opening signaled the start of class, forcing the group of friends to end their debate to quickly settle into their seats. Rumin still couldn't hide the annoyance on her face upon seeing Ito's smug smile, silently mocking that he was truly an eccentric. As dusk fell, the little girl waved goodbye to Hyri and her silver-haired friend at the school gate before getting into the car to head home. Sitting quietly in the back seat, Rumin stared blankly out the window with a melancholic face. It seemed she was besieged by negative thoughts. Seeing the little girl looking unwell, the manager caringly asked and received an anxious confession about the results of the recent audition. Despite receiving reassurances that with her current abilities she would definitely pass, the fear in Rumin's heart did not diminish at all. Her purple eyes suddenly became hazy and piercingly cold, reflecting a soul that was bearing a pressure far too great for her age. The prospect of being abandoned flashed back in her mind, making Rumin shiver with a fear that if she failed, she would have nowhere left to belong. However, all the gloom vanished a few days later when good news arrived, confirming that the little girl had officially passed the grueling selection process. Standing in the office, Rumin beamed a radiant smile and bowed her head in thanks for the congratulations, ready for a promising artistic journey ahead. Hyri and Ito couldn't hide their excitement upon hearing the good news. They celebrated together because now all three of them could stand together in front of the same camera lens. Even the female manager behind the wheel flashed a bright smile, affirming that she had never doubted Rumin's ability to pass. Tears of happiness gently rolled down. The little girl respectfully clasped her hands, silently giving thanks that her efforts had finally paid off beautifully. Sitting in the back of the car, Rumin's heart continuously raced. She nervously wondered if a strict father like Jung Hajin would feel proud of her. A beautiful vision appeared in the little girl's mind of her father shedding his cold demeanor to offer a warm smile and give her words of praise. However, reality struck when the house door suddenly swung open with determination, pulling Rumin back to her anxiety-filled calculations. Unable to hold back for another second, the little girl yelled out, boldly announcing to her father that she had officially passed the grueling audition. Jung Hajin stood tall in the middle of the living room with the result sheet in hand, showing a stunned expression as he watched his daughter rushing toward him in utter excitement. The top star's eyes suddenly wavered. It seemed he couldn't immediately process the miracle that the little girl had just created. In contrast to that stunned look was Rumin's radiant face. The little girl laughed out loud in ultimate happiness for finally proving her worth. In a fit of extreme excitement, Rumin rushed to tightly hug her superstar father to share the joy of officially passing. Yet, in response to that enthusiasm was Hajin's pale and awkward face. He froze stiff as if he had just touched something entirely alien. Without a single word of congratulations, the cold father decisively pushed Rumin away, making the little girl tumble onto the cold floor in astonishment. Looking up with shocked purple eyes, Rumin could not believe that even in her most successful moment, she was still ruthlessly chased away. A surge of self-pity arose, making the little girl silently blame herself for having been too delusional about a warm hug that inherently never belonged to her. Seeing the hurt clearly visible on his daughter's face, Hajin slightly bowed his head and uttered a hesitant apology, as if trying to cover up his own confusion. The atmosphere in the luxury apartment suddenly became suffocating and heavy. A vast distance once again manifested between the two solitary figures. Right at that moment, Uncle Wu Jin happily opened the door to return home, shattering the silent space with his usual enthusiastic greeting. However, the smile on his lips suddenly vanished, replaced by a look of shock upon witnessing firsthand the incomprehensible scene before his eyes. Wu Jin stood rooted in the middle of the hallway, silently looking at Rumin sitting flat on the floor and Hajin standing tall nearby with endless worry. Lumin's sudden display of affection made Hajin panic and push her away hard, a ruthlessly natural reflex. While the father stood frozen with his trembling hands full of awkwardness, Rumin looked up in shock, full of hurt. Witnessing that confusing scene, Uncle Wu Jin couldn't help but feel heartbroken for his little niece sitting on the floor with tear-filled eyes. He harshly questioned Hajin about the recent violent action, while the older brother could only clutch his head in agony over his loss of control. Hajin agonizingly confessed that he did not mean to at all, but the sudden appearance of a hug had truly sent him into a panic. Wu Jin's gaze suddenly turned somber as he saw through the misery tormenting the famous older brother's mind. A sigh escaped the young doctor's chest. It seemed he had somehow deduced the deep-rooted cause of the incident. He requested that all three of them sit down together to talk calmly, making an effort to heal the newly formed cracks between the father and daughter. The living room space sank into a tense silence as Hajin sat alone opposite Rumin and Wu Jin on the sofa. Hajin lowered his voice to reveal a bitter truth that he was suffering from haphophobia, making him unable to endure any physical contact from others. Hajin painfully explained that unexpected physical contact was truly out of his control and sent a sincere apology to his daughter. The truth about his haphophobia left Rumin stunned in shock. The little girl began to vaguely understand the suffering her father was enduring. However, the little girl still voiced her wonder as to why he could still perform very natural touching scenes while filming. Hajin looked down slightly, full of emotion. He lowered his voice to explain that in those moments of getting into character, he was completely no longer himself. The star father's highly artistic answer amazed Rumin so much that she widened her eyes, her mind becoming incredibly agitated. He continued to confess that every time he got into character, he simply considered himself a character in the script rather than the real-life Jung Hajin. It was thanks to this extreme psychological detachment that helped him temporarily forget his fear to be able to touch others in the most professional way. Hajin's gaze suddenly became distant and sad, reflecting a life of having to live under countless masks to escape a hurtful reality. Rumin softly let out an exclamation in belated understanding. The little girl began to clearly feel the loneliness her superstar father had had all this time. The confessions about merely considering himself an actor kept repeating in her mind, marking a major turning point in the bond between father and daughter. Lying in the dark room, Rumin still constantly pondered over the secret behind the fear of touch and how acting was the only way her father could make contact with people. Her pensive gaze looked up at the ceiling, silently wondering if that was the real reason Jung Hajin always poured his heart and soul into every role. Because only when living another life in a movie could her father temporarily forget the pain to become a more complete and freer person than ever. A big question suddenly swirled deep into her mind, leaving Rumin shocked. Was she putting effort into acting just to hope for recognition from her father? But she quickly brushed that thought away, affirming that she was not acting just to please others or for superficial purposes. Her purple eyes shone with an extraordinary resolve as the little girl gradually touched the truest desire hidden deep in her soul. That after all the glory or ultimate efforts, what the little girl truly yearned for was simply finding a simple happiness alongside her loved ones. The radiant dawn dispelled all darkness, Uncle Woo Jin's calling echoed in the apartment, signaling a hopeful new day officially beginning. By the cozy breakfast table, the uncle excitedly reminded her that today was Lumin's first day of shooting and curiously asked if she felt nervous or not. Lumin smiled brightly in response that she was extremely excited, ready to face the first big challenge on the professional artistic path. After the cozy breakfast, Uncle Woo Jin and Father Hajin cleaned up the dining table together to prepare the luggage for Lumin's first day of shooting. Just as the little girl was about to step out the door, Hajin suddenly spoke up, asking his daughter to stop for a moment because he had something important to say. Lumin stopped short slightly, her round purple eyes clearly showing bewilderment as she witnessed the unusually hesitant attitude of her superstar father. Hajin slowly took out a small but incredibly exquisite gift box and handed it to the little girl as a sincerely encouraging gesture. Lumin's tiny hands trembled slightly with emotion as she received the first gift that her father personally prepared just for her. With indescribable nervousness, the little girl gently opened the box lid, revealing a sparkling object shining softly under the morning sunlight. Lumin's eyes suddenly lit up radiantly as if containing 1,000 stars, reflecting the ultimate happiness bursting in her heart. It was an exquisite silver necklace with a pendant engraved with her name, an invaluable treasure proving the cold father's recognition. Hajin gently said that he hoped she would become a great actress and softly asked if this gift truly made her feel satisfied. Putting the necklace around her neck, Lumin flashed a radiant, proud smile, ready to enter the film crew with a heart full of faith and strength. Uncle Woo Jin smiled in praise that the necklace was truly very beautiful and perfectly suited Lumin's elegant aura. The little girl turned to look at her father with sparkling eyes, affirming that she absolutely loved this gift and would try her best for the role. In the face of his daughter's sincerity, Hajin smiled slightly, nodding in satisfaction, and gave a brief but highly encouraging compliment. The scene shifted to the container area utilized as the makeup and waiting room for the Yang spin-off film crew. Inside the room full of equipment, Lumin, neatly dressed in a hanbok, was excitedly using her phone to capture the memorable moment. The little girl didn't forget to strike a playful pose with a victory sign, cleverly revealing the commemorative necklace shining on her neck. Right after that, Lumin quickly sent the cute selfie to the group chat to announce that she had completed her appearance preparations. Mo Hyri immediately responded with extreme excitement, endlessly praising her friend's cuteness and promising to meet up soon. However, the brown-haired friend's attention was quickly drawn to the sparkling object on Lumin's neck, causing her to exclaim in amazement. With a smile that couldn't be more radiant, Lumin proudly showed off that this was the meaningful gift her father had given her on the first day of filming. Mo Hyri couldn't help but marvel upon learning the necklace was a limited handmade item, silently admiring the thoughtfulness Lumin's father had dedicated to the little girl. Looking at the phone screen, Lumin froze slightly at the truth that this gift carried a much greater intention than she had thought. The little girl wistfully realized that Jung Hajin probably truly cared about her a lot, even though his way of expressing it was always dry and distant. A loud shout demanding the actors to prepare for the first scene shattered the quiet atmosphere, marking the beginning of the Yang spin-off project. Standing in the middle of the sun-drenched historical film set, Lumin took a deep breath, gathering all her focus to prepare to step into the world of the character Jaren. Her biggest rival, Jean Soil, also appeared with a professional demeanor, her calm gray eyes as if already too familiar with the camera lens. To ensure the authenticity of the character's styling, the female manager quickly suggested Lumin take off the precious necklace and give it to her for safekeeping. Her purple eyes suddenly became sharp and contained a positive electric current as the little girl began to sink deep into a frenzied state of getting into character. Jean Soil slightly tilted her head with a mysterious smile, an underlying challenge sent through the noble demeanor of a young lady from the Joseon era. Following the capable silhouette of the Jean genius walking into the scene, Lumin clenched her fists, determined to create the performance of a lifetime. Lumin took a deep breath to reassure herself that everything would be fine as she stood at the threshold of her professional career. The little girl's hands tightly gripped the hem of her hanbok, silently swearing to herself that she would absolutely never allow herself to step back. The third scene of episode 1 officially began with the appearance of the character Yunyang, played by Jean Soil, being led into the palace by her father. Amidst the expansive historical film set, every camera lens focused on each elegant gesture and the professional demeanor of the genius. The film crew staff gently reminded Rumin to wait patiently and only be allowed to enter the frame upon receiving the official signal. Observing from a hidden corner, Rumin couldn't help but be astounded, as this was her first time witnessing Soil's true acting skills with her own eyes. The invisible pressure from her rival's fame caused memories of contestants who had collapsed in despair to suddenly flash back hauntingly in her mind. The bitter laments about the terrifying presence of the wall, named Jean Soil, seemed to further urge the little girl's fighting instinct to rise. Her purple eyes suddenly grew sharp and held intense focus. The little girl was suppressing all her emotions to prepare for getting into character. The clear, urging voice announcing it was her turn startled Rumin awake. The little girl decisively stepped straight into the set with a highly capable demeanor. The specialized camera lens coldly pointed toward the set, ready to record the confrontation between the two child geniuses. Rumin's purple eyes clearly showed sharpness and intense focus as she began to sink deep into the state of getting into character. In this scene, the character Jaren is carefully hugging a gift box while crossing the palace courtyard to carry out her assigned task. Suddenly, a heartbreaking wail calling out for a father rang out, making the little girl jump in fright and hurriedly look back toward the city gates. Before her eyes was the sight of Yunying struggling desperately, trying to escape the grip to run after her father's fading back. Jean Soil had completely transformed into a child separated from her flesh and blood. Her screams calling for her father carried a boundless pain. Witnessing those peak acting skills, Rumin couldn't help but be shocked as she felt the overwhelming aura from her opponent. Soil continuously cried and screamed in tears. Every gesture of reaching out to hold on was so realistic that it made viewers' hearts clench. Staring intently into the tragedy-filled eyes of the genius, Rumin silently affirmed that this was the greatest challenge of her life. The image of the Hope Orphanage suddenly rushed back in her memories, reminding Rumin to use her own real-life pain so as not to be swallowed by others. The traumatic memory flooded back of her terrible father heartlessly abandoning Rumin at the orphanage, along with the cold declaration that she would have to live here from now on. Rumin's purple eyes shockingly realized that Jean Soil's talent was not just an empty rumor. She was truly a formidable opponent on the professional stage. Before her eyes, Soil was sobbing bitterly in the role of Yunying, earnestly begging her father to take her along in ultimate despair. The sight of the child left behind in the middle of the vast palace courtyard, ceaselessly screaming not to be abandoned, touched the deepest emotions of everyone present. Through the monitor screen, the stunned expression of the character Jaren, played by Rumin, appeared incredibly realistic as she witnessed her friend's tragedy. The obsession from the past made her face turn pale, cold sweat breaking out as the boundary between film and real life suddenly blurred. Director Ju Young-chan attentively observed every frame. His face clearly showed a pensive look as he evaluated the dramatic coordination of the two child geniuses. A deeply thoughtful frown from the helmsman of the film. It seemed he had spotted a special energy powerfully rising from Rumin. The director's clear shout of "cut" rang out, signaling that the first recording session had ended smoothly, dispelling the tense atmosphere enveloping the set. Relieved of her psychological burden, Rumin beamed a bright, relieved smile, silently proud that she had excellently completed her first task under the professional lens. Under the radiant sunlight of the film set, Rumin flashed a bright smile after completing the scene, silently feeling relieved that the first step went smoothly. Tears of happiness fell gently. The little girl hurriedly wiped them away, while her heart was filled with faith in her hard-fought performance just now. Director Ju Young-chan spared no words of praise for Soil doing a great job, making Rumin standing from afar also feel a contagious excitement at her rival's excellence. The little girl proudly told herself that she had also thrown herself fully into the role and hoped the results would turn out smoothly, just as the crew expected. However, Director Ju suddenly stared pensively at the monitor screen and began to give somber assessments of Rumin's performance. Standing before that silence, Rumin nervously waited for a compliment, her eyes sparkling with the expectation of a truly perfect start. Contrary to her expectations, The director dropped a comment that this performance was only at an acceptable level and they didn't need to waste effort reshooting it. That perfunctory response left Rumin so shocked that she froze. Her face suddenly darkened with extreme disappointment. She bitterly thought to herself that being evaluated as merely acceptable was no different from a cruel denial of the talent she had always poured her heart into for so long. The atmosphere suddenly became suffocating when the director asked the whole crew to take a break to prepare for the next scene, leaving Rumin alone in disappointment. After the scene ended, Rumin refused to give up but quietly tailed director Ju Young-chan to seek a satisfactory explanation. Under the ancient eaves of the palace, the air between the two suddenly grew unusually tense when this little girl stubbornly refused to leave. Director Ju Young-chan turned around with a hesitant look. It seemed he had early on recognized the unshakable stubbornness hidden behind that petite figure. Rumin's purple eyes burned with the fire of a thirst for learning. The little girl braced herself to face the cruel truth about her own abilities. Seeing Rumin persistently following him closely, Director Ju had no choice but to stop and ask why she kept tailing him like that. Without any fear, Rumin boldly questioned the reason. He only rated her as acceptable and earnestly demanded that he point out her remaining flaws directly. The unexpected bluntness and fierce determination of a 12-year-old child left the veteran director astounded and made him start looking at the little girl seriously. He sighed softly and scratched his cheek awkwardly before deciding to deliver the strictest professional critiques to enlighten the child genius. Director Ju bluntly stated that Rumin's biggest mistake was letting her emotions erupt too strongly, far exceeding the script's requirements. He affirmed that because she was only playing a supporting role, she needed to know how to restrain her emotions to blend with the main lead instead of turning herself into the center of attention in an out-of-place manner. Rumin stood blankly in the middle of the palace courtyard, her mouth softly uttering words of shock as she realized her long-standing efforts had suddenly become a burden to the crew. Director Ju Young-chan casually offered words of reassurance that she didn't need to mind, because all emotional mistakes could be fixed through editing techniques. Looking at the man's cold face, Rumin felt the self-esteem of a genius actor being ruthlessly trampled. He continued to press on, assuring her to just act with peace of mind because the film crew already had Jean Soil to shoulder the main responsibility. The director assumed that if it were another child, they would be overshadowed by her, but with Soil's capability, the two of them would coordinate very well. A strong gust of wind suddenly blew across the set, sweeping up rustling leaves as if mocking the disappointment surrounding the little girl's mind. Rumin stood alone in the middle of the vast palace courtyard, her small figure bowing down full of sorrow before the harsh prejudices of the helmsman. The little girl bitterly recalled the director's words in her head, silently wondering if Soil's presence was the actual reason she was allowed to exist here. A cruel truth flashed, making Rumin shiver. She feared that without the Jean genius, perhaps she would have been failed right from the audition round. The little girl quietly turned and walked back to the silent waiting room behind the rows of containers, carrying an intense determination for revenge. The waiting room door swung open decisively, followed by a small figure sinking deep into chaotic streams of thought. Stepping out of the container row, Rumin blankly headed toward the set with a heavy heart due to the harsh comments from the director. The little girl feared that, if Jung Hajin found out about her weakness today, he would certainly be extremely disappointed and abandon her once again. However, that pain multiplied manifold when Rumin accidentally overheard malicious whispers about her passing the audition only thanks to the shadow of her famous father. Other child actors casually dropped contemptuous words behind her back, asserting that Rumin's talent was merely an empty title and everything had been prearranged. They even viciously spread rumors that the sperm donation story was just a charade to cover up a scandalous affair in order to protect the superstar's image. Standing frozen in the silent space, Rumin felt her heart being squeezed, thinking that her very existence was staining Jung Hajin's reputation. In a hidden corner of the restroom, a choked sob echoed in despair, as if wanting to pour out all the grievances that a 12-year-old child could not bear. Rumin buried her head in her small hands, letting tears roll down her face that was gradually becoming lifeless due to such deep wounds. However, the little girl suddenly raised her head with a sharp gaze, silently affirming that she had already known all these cruel truths right from the start. Rumin tried to suppress her pain while reading positive comments claiming Hajin was a wonderful father for adopting the child despite having no obligation. But the cruel truth appeared right after with a series of insults claiming that everything was just a play to whitewash a dirty image. Sitting alone in the restroom, the little girl bowed her head in full inferiority complex, thinking that her appearance was unintentionally becoming a burden to her father. A sudden knock on the door broke the silent space, making Rumin hurriedly wipe away the tears still lingering on her pale face. Hairi worriedly called her friend's name, and as soon as the door opened, she couldn't help but be shocked to see Rumin's red, swollen eyes from crying. Hairi panically asked for the reason that broke Rumin's heart so much, while the little girl could only stand silently with the melancholy tearing at her soul. Unable to hold it back any longer, Rumin burst into loud sobs and threw herself into her best friend's arms, as if seeking a peaceful haven amidst the storm of public opinion. Hairi gently patted and coaxed her little friend to pour out her heart to ease the overwhelming burdens she had been silently bearing all this time. Behind the row of containers, Rumin's sudden disappearance had thrown the film crew into a panic, forcing everyone to split up and search everywhere. Finally, Hairi led Rumin back by the hand, her face bowed in full apology, informing the crew that she had found the child actor in a state of breakdown. Seeing Rumin return with red, swollen eyes, both the female manager and her friend Ito were undeniably shocked and gasped in unison, full of worry. The manager panically asked about the reason that made the little girl burst into tears and pressed to know if something truly terrible had happened. Facing everyone's concern, Rumin slightly bowed her head, silently telling herself that she didn't want to reveal the truth about the vicious insults she had just heard. The little girl decided to hide the pain in her heart, using the excuse that she felt devastated because the director seemed dissatisfied with her acting. Hearing that, Ito couldn't help but look bewildered and asked back with a confused look if Rumin actually burst into tears just over such a simple reason. Hairi quickly spoke up to soothe her, affirming that Rumin's performance was wonderful and she herself was completely won over when watching the video. Ito followed up, calling her a perfectionist and reminding her that even the genius Jean Soil couldn't act perfectly right from the early days. Receiving encouragement from her manager that what she was doing was already quite amazing, Rumin slightly looked up with eyes containing hope. To shatter the anxiety, the silver-haired boy decisively advised that if she was still not reassured, the whole group should spend more time practicing together. Ending the conversation with a mischievous wink, Ito excitedly invited everyone to come to his house to hold a private rehearsal. The silver-haired friend's sudden invitation to his house for a rehearsal made both Rumin and Hairi freeze in shock, unable to believe their ears. By the next day, both girls fell completely into a state of severe shock, mouths wide open in awe when witnessing the practice setting with their own eyes. Appearing before their eyes was a magnificent, grand villa hidden amidst a forest, exuding the nobility of the ultra-rich. Kwan Ito appeared radiantly in the main hall, casually waving to welcome his two friends as if this were just an ordinary apartment. Meanwhile, the two female friends could only stand rooted to the spot, silently complaining that their jaws were about to drop due to this breathtaking extravagance. The group was dwarfed in the middle of the gorgeous interior space with sparkling crystal chandeliers and an overwhelming royal style. The astonishment reached its peak when Rumin discovered that even inside the villa, a private elevator was equipped to move between floors. As soon as they stopped in front of his private room door, Ito excitedly declared that the group had finally set foot in his kingdom. Witnessing the luxurious bedroom that was no different from a miniature palace, the two girls could only scream in admiration for their wealthy friend. The secret rehearsal officially began in the cozy space, where the child geniuses shared together their burning passion for art. Ito began to analyze that the core of Director Ju's comment was that Rumin had not yet been able to blend smoothly with her co-stars. With a highly confident expression, the silver-haired boy declared that he had found a perfect solution to completely overcome this flaw. A radiant smile lit up Ito's face as he prepared to announce a special rehearsal plan right in his own room. Both Rumin and Hairi froze in amazement, completely overwhelmed by their friend's proactiveness and capable leading demeanor. Ito decisively assigned the roles. He would take on the male lead Kim Saiwon, Rumin would be Jaren, and Hyri would temporarily replace Soil to play Yunying. Hyri burst into joy upon being assigned a main role for the first time. The little girl couldn't stop screaming from this incredibly unexpected happiness. The little master set up a scenario where the court maids met Saiwon under the pagoda tree and demanded everyone to improvise their responses without a script. The play officially began when Ito immediately got into character. He looked around blankly and wondered to himself why he couldn't see anyone around. The boy frantically searched for his two friends Jaren and Yunying, who were hiding, turning the bedroom space into a highly dramatic historical stage. Faced with Ito's extremely fast and incredibly natural emotional transition, Rumin could only gape in astonishment, officially drawn into the rehearsal. Rumin quickly got into the character of court maid Jaren. The little girl stepped into the hypothetical setting and politely asked if young Master Saiwon had been waiting for them for a long time. Following up was Hyri in the role of Yunying. The little girl hurriedly ran over and explained that she was suddenly caught by the head court lady to do the laundry, which led to her being late. Ito slightly narrowed his eyes thoughtfully upon hearing the deeply respectful address. The boy spoke up, wondering why the two of them were still using honorifics even now. The little master smiled radiantly, suggesting that from now on they should just call him Saiwon intimately to erase all barriers of social status. The overly liberal suggestion made the two girls unavoidably stunned. They worriedly asked back whether that was truly appropriate for the strict hierarchy in the Forbidden Palace. Ito casually brushed aside all cumbersome rules, affirming that when it was just the three of them together, those feudal etiquettes were completely no longer important. Rumin and Hyri's eyes suddenly lit up with excitement. They couldn't hide their jubilation upon receiving such special appreciation from their noble friend. Joyful laughter spread throughout the space as the group began setting up games on the floor, enjoying carefree moments of entertainment together. Ito excitedly waved his hand to welcome the joining of his close friends, creating a warm palace setting full of friendship. The rehearsal progressed rhythmically until the character Yunying suddenly wondered about the reason young Master Saiwon was late for today's important appointment. Rumin and Hyri, in court-maid outfits, were walking and discussing how the young Master Saiwon always grumbled about them frequently being late. Suddenly, a painful groan escaped as Saiwon tightly clutched his arm, his face turning pale and contorting from a terrible pain. Witnessing the sudden collapse of their friend right before their eyes, both girls fell into a state of shock and extreme terror. Rumin and Hyri panically rushed over, calling his character's name repeatedly and pressing to know if he was injured anywhere. Before they could touch him, Saiwon was completely exhausted and collapsed onto the cold floor in the helplessness of his two co-stars. Lying sprawled with sad eyes, the boy whispered that he had one final confession he wanted to send to both of them. The tragic scene made Rumin and Hyri unable to hold back their tears, their faces contorting with sorrow for their comrade. With his last dying breath, Ito in the role of Saiwon revealed a shocking truth that he was actually not young Master Kim Saiwon. Rumin was so astounded that she widened her purple eyes. The little girl screamed out while choking back tears to ask what his true identity actually was. Amidst the suffocating and breathtakingly tense atmosphere, the boy moved his lips preparing to say his real name, leaving everything in anticipation. Rumin and Hyri still hadn't recovered from the shock of the mysterious cliffhanger, their eyes wide open waiting for an earth-shattering secret. Yet Ito casually delivered another shock when he boldly affirmed that he was actually a creature from another planet. The silver-haired boy lay motionless on the floor, deliberately creating bizarre plot twists to add more drama to his absurd roleplay. This drastic plot twist made his two female friends completely freeze, their minds seemingly stalled before the other's over-the-top creativity. Rumin's mouth twitched slightly, her face clearly showing frustration upon realizing she had just been blatantly teased by her eccentric friend. The little girl couldn't hold it in anymore and yelled out in anger, reminding Ito that they were acting in a historical drama, not a sci-fi movie. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became awkward as Ito still stubbornly maintained his dying state despite his co-star's criticism. Hyri worriedly wondered whether Rumin's harsh reaction was ruining the rules of this highly spontaneous improvisation rehearsal, because the core goal of today's lesson was to train the ability to maintain the emotional flow in the most unexpected and absurd situations. That no matter how crazy the dialogue thrown out by the opponent was, A capable actor still had to know how to handle the situation completely naturally. Ito is lying flat on the floor looking exhausted, his sluggish eyes signaling his friends to brace themselves, causing Rumin to look visibly baffled and skeptical as the girl tries to find an explanation for her friend's bizarre behavior right before her eyes. But Ito immediately reassures them that this is just an impromptu rehearsal and urges everyone to quickly get into character for the play. Rumin silently complains that in the Joseon era, no one could possibly know the word alien, then innocently asks what on earth it is anyway. Ito smirks triumphantly and points upward, explaining in a mystical tone that they are creatures from the other side of the sky. Hyori can't hold back anymore and yells, scolding young Master Saiwan for joking around too much again, which ruins the group's emotional flow. Ignoring the protests, the silver-haired boy continues to weave the absurd story that young Master Saiwan has actually been abducted by a flying saucer. The mention of a UFO leaves both Rumin and Hyori speechless. They yell in unison, demanding Ito stop acting and give them their normal friend back. Ito still won't stop. Sweating profusely but keeping his mischievous smile, he declares that he is actually a spy secretly gathering information. His eyes suddenly become much darker and more intense as he prepares to drop another dramatic plot twist for the next scene. Ito suddenly transformed into a miserable wretch writhing in agony, screaming that he had been heartlessly betrayed by his closest comrades. The little boy looked up with desperate, tear-filled eyes, earnestly begging his two friends to lend a hand and save him from this critical crisis. Ito's overly immersive acting left both Rumin and Hyori astounded. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became unusually dramatic. Realizing this was an exciting improvisation challenge, Rumin quickly caught the rhythm and reached out her hand, declaring that she agreed to step in and help him. And just like that, the group bounced ideas off each other to create unexpected plot twists, causing the rehearsal to completely veer into a strangely different film genre. The historical play suddenly turned into a thrilling sci-fi adventure, where the three children embarked on a journey together to save Joseon from an alien invasion. The fun was reaching its climax when a sudden knock on the door rang out, accompanied by the maid's announcement that dinner for the young master was fully prepared. That sound acted like a splash of cold water, pulling all three child trainees back to reality, jolting them awake from the mesmerizing imaginary world. Rumin looked around the magnificent room in bewilderment. The little girl was silently amazed, realizing she had completely lost track of time because she was so engrossed in the role. While her two friends were still excitedly praising the highly effective rehearsal, Rumin suddenly realized that all this time she had been too pressured and forgot the pure joy of embodying a character. The sunset dyed the majestic villa red, inside the magnificent living room with the crystal chandelier shining brilliantly. What struck the two girls' eyes was an overwhelmingly lavish dining table with countless delicacies exquisitely arranged. Rumin and Hyori were completely won over, their eyes lighting up with unconcealable excitement before this opulence. Ito casually invited his friends to feel free and enjoy the meal, affirming that the butler had gone all out to prepare a special dinner. Amidst the bustling atmosphere, Rumin involuntarily startled and looked back when she heard a powerful voice just speak up from behind. An elderly man with a dignified demeanor stepped forward, speaking up to ask if these were Ito's new friends. Hyori panically bowed her head in greeting upon realizing it was the illustrious chairman Kwon Unchul, whom she usually only saw on the news. The chairman smiled kindly. He amicably told everyone to just comfortably sit down and enjoy the delicious feast. The three children had dinner together in the cozy space of the villa, enjoying rare moments of relaxation after practice hours. Hyori endlessly praised the deliciousness of the food, making Rumin also smile radiantly because she felt true happiness. The dinner was ongoing when the butler approached to softly inform Chairman Unchul of some rather unpleasant news. He reported that director Kwon Jin-woo had sent a message that he would continue not coming home tonight. This news sent Chairman Unchul into a fury. He slammed the table and angrily yelled, asking how many days his son had neglected the family like this. He continued to harshly scold the irresponsibility of a father leaving his young child alone night after night. Faced with his grandfather's thunderous rage, Ito softly spoke up to intervene while his two female friends sitting nearby could only hold their breath in fear. Realizing he was scaring the children, The chairman hurriedly restrained his emotions and apologized for his sudden loss of composure. Ito forced a smile to reassure his grandfather that he was completely fine and understood his father's busy work, though Rumin silently noticed the sadness in his eyes. The silver-haired boy nonchalantly continued to eat his meal heartily, as if he was all too familiar with this constant absence of his father. Looking at his grandson trying to act strong and overly understanding for his age, Chairman Unchul's eyes suddenly became sad mixed with a tinge of sorrow. He quietly observed Ito with a clenched heart, silently feeling infinite pity for the poor grandson who had to brace himself to live in the absence of love. When it was late at night, Rumin and Hairi politely bid farewell to Ito's family to head home after a highly dramatic day of rehearsal. Right at that moment, Ito's grandfather, Chairman Kwan, suddenly signaled his secretary to bring over 2 envelopes that had been prepared in advance. Rumin couldn't help but be shocked as the powerful chairman personally handed the envelope toward her with an incredibly calm demeanor. He gently instructed that this was just a little pocket money, hoping the 2 girls would always be good friends accompanying Ito. Rumin's tiny hands trembled as she received the heavy envelope. The little girl silently felt a not-so-small value hidden inside. Seeing his friend's hesitation, Ito casually reassured her that to his grandfather, this was just pocket change to buy candy, so she shouldn't feel too pressured. Not letting anyone miss out, the chairman also quickly presented a similar gift to Hairi to her utter amazement. The whole group waved goodbye together in front of the gate of the magnificent mansion, closing an evening full of delightful surprises. The car carrying the 2 girls gradually rolled away from the luxurious villa area, taking with it precious material and spiritual gifts. Upon opening the envelopes, both Rumin and Hairi almost fainted when seeing the dazzling stack of 1,000,000 won. They screamed in delight for suddenly becoming filthy rich. Holding the stack of 1,000,000 won in hand, Rumin and Hairi couldn't hide their excitement, chattering away to discuss whether to go celebrate or buy something truly meaningful. Rumin's purple eyes lit up radiantly. The little girl seemed to be fully enjoying the sweet happiness after long days of effort. Despite Hairi suggesting a series of appealing ideas, Rumin calmly declared that she would save this money, making her friend incredibly admire her. In truth, there was always a vague fear of being abandoned lingering in the little girl's heart, so she wanted to keep this money as capital to protect herself later. Rumin's expression suddenly turned somber, then broke into a meaningful smile, reflecting the soul of a child who had to mature early in the face of adversity. Looking at the stack of money in her hand, the little girl silently changed her view of her silver-haired friend, admitting that Ito was actually an incredibly decent and kind person. The 2 girls joyfully swore together to become Ito's closest friends as the car gradually disappeared into the silent night. Time flew by to the following weekend. The setting of the Yang spin-off historical film set appeared magnificently under the brilliant golden sunlight. Right at the set, Ito suddenly flashed a mischievous smile, loudly reminding the director not to forget the massive investment from his grandfather and treat him badly. That declaration, full of relying on connections, left director Ju Young-chan so shocked that his face changed color. He growled, demanding the boy to repeat what he just said. Rumin shockingly retracts her praise for Ito, realizing that the true nature of this wealthy friend is not as simple as she thought. At the outdoor waiting area of the Yang spin-off film crew, a busy atmosphere envelopes the rows of tents reserved for the actors. Under the tent, a veteran actress in a dark blue hanbok is kindly asking Jean Soil about her mother's current condition. She can't help but feel heartbroken when mentioning the passing of a talented star and secretly regrets a career that was originally at the peak of its glory. The affirmation of the late mother's pride in Soil's talent leaves Rumin, standing from afar, unable to help but feel admiration mixed with pressure. The girl secretly highly evaluates her rival's class when even the most renowned seniors must give Soil their absolute recognition. However, that veteran actress suddenly approaches Rumin. She smiles and says that she has watched her acting clips and found them very impressive. The unexpected encouragement makes Rumin deeply moved. The girl blushes, stammers her thanks, and secretly wonders if the woman is intentionally trying to soothe her fears. Meanwhile, other child actors start whispering maliciously, questioning whether a newcomer like Rumin truly deserves that praise. Rumin's eyes suddenly become sharp and cold. The girl suppresses all her frustration deep inside to prepare for a truly explosive performance on set. Rumin points forward in shock, yelling that the other person's recent behavior was incredibly embarrassing. She can't understand what her friend is saying and presses him on why he is loudly picking a fight and causing a scene on the set like that. Faced with that questioning, Ito casually expresses his disgust and contempt for those who always like to cause such trouble. Hairi, standing nearby, forces a smile and plays along, nodding to confirm that she completely agrees with the silver-haired boy's observation. But the atmosphere suddenly drops when Rumin notices the terrifyingly empty and gloomy eyes of the genius Jin Soil. In the scene at Susong Palace, the character Eunyoung adamantly refuses to eat, making Jaren loudly urge her friend to stop torturing herself. That sorrowful expression is so authentic that it gives Rumin chills, making her feel like Soil is someone who has truly given up all hope in life. Ito continues explaining director Ju's feedback, emphasizing that Rumin is struggling to emotionally connect with her surrounding co-stars. Looking at Soil's hauntingly haggard face and character, Rumin feels the pressure weighing heavily on her shoulders more than ever before. She secretly doubts her own abilities against such a formidable rival, despite director Ju always reassuring her that Soil's presence will actually help her pull off the role better. Ito immerses himself deep into the rehearsal at the villa. He writhes and screams that he has been heartlessly betrayed by his closest teammates. The boy looks up with desperate, tear-filled eyes, earnestly begging his two friends to step in and save him from this critical situation. Ito's stellar role-playing leaves both Rumin and Hairi stunned. The atmosphere in the room suddenly becomes unusually dramatic. Standing at the threshold of her career, Rumin silently resolves not to let herself be eclipsed by the massive aura of her rival Jin Soil. The girl tells herself to trust in the hours of diligent practice with her friends to create the most seamless coordination possible. The official shoot begins, and Rumin transforms into the fierce maid Jaren. She angrily yells, forcing Lady Yunying to eat immediately. However, in response to that pressure is Soil's empty and lifeless gaze, an expression like she has truly given up all hope in life. As the tension rises, an unexpected incident occurs when the bowl of porridge in Rumin's hands is splashed right onto young Master Siwon, who has just appeared. Rumin covers her mouth in horror at the disastrous mistake, while Soil maintains her immobile, in-character state with great poise. Ito, playing Siwon, stands rooted to the spot with a drenched face, his eyes wide with utter shock at a situation completely outside the script. Ito tries to suppress a mischievous smile upon seeing Soil's miserable state, making Rumin, standing nearby, unable to help but feel uneasy. The young master suddenly bursts into arrogant laughter and mocks that she looks like nothing more than a pathetic mess. In the midst of an extremely serious film set, Ito points and laughs gleefully, causing a scene in the space to the astonishment of the crew. Rumin panics and yells that what he just said is completely far off from the script, demanding Ito immediately stop this crazy behavior. Immediately, director Ju Youngchan angrily calls to stop filming, his face clearly showing impatience upon witnessing this chaotic scene. He steps forward with a harsh attitude, strictly reminding Ito that he must adhere exactly to what the script dictates. With a face scowling from frustration, the director emphasizes that his impromptu dialogue just now has absolutely no relevance at all. In response to that fury, Ito casually laces his hands behind his head and asks in return if this way of acting isn't much better. The boy's obnoxiously innocent expression leaves the director with his jaw dropped in amazement at the other's sheer overconfidence. Ito maintains his challenging gaze. He squints, smiles, and begs everyone to honestly admit that this joke is very interesting. Ito points his finger at Soil with a mocking look, asking who could look at that pitiful face and not burst out laughing. Although according to the script, the character Siwon is supposed to be sensitive and compassionate, the boy bluntly criticizes that as too outdated and boring. This arrogant declaration catches director Ju Youngchan completely off guard, his face clearly showing such bewilderment that he is left speechless. He helplessly brings a hand to cover his face, sighing inwardly at the stubbornness and massive ego of the chaebol young master who is turning the set upside down. Sternly demanding a reshoot of the scene, the director warns Ito absolutely not to improvise at will but to stick closely to the script's original content. He orders the makeup team to quickly step in and fix Ito's appearance, preparing for another tense take. In response to that anger is merely Ito's indifferent look and careless attitude. It seems he still doesn't realize his own mistake. The boy continues to burst out laughing heartily, pointing at his co-star and dropping mocking remarks about her pathetically unkempt appearance. The fury reaches its peak, causing director Ju to scream the order to stop filming. He frantically tears at his hair over Ito's sabotage. Watching that chaotic scene, the crew members just look at each other in weariness, worrying whether today's shoot can even be finished. Ito still won't stop laughing at Soil's miserable state. He sarcastically asks who could feel pity instead of bursting into laughter at that pitiful face. Director Ju angrily emphasizes that the character Saiwon is originally supposed to be sensitive and tolerant, but the boy bluntly criticizes that as too cliché and tedious. The young master's innocent face combined with his arrogant declaration leaves the film's showrunner with his jaw dropped in astonishment. He helplessly brings a hand up to cover his face, sighing inwardly at having to deal with a child so stubborn and troublesome as to be uncontrollable like Ito. Sternly ordering the scene to be res hot, the director demands he absolutely not improvise on his own, but stick closely to the original script. But Ito suddenly flashes a smug smile, casually reminding the director not to forget the massive investment his grandfather poured into this project. The blatant threat makes director Ju pale with indignation. He growls, questioning if the boy is disrespecting the efforts of the entire film crew. The only response to that fury is Ito's lifeless stare and indifferent attitude, showing that he doesn't care at all about the other's anger. Ito suddenly changes his attitude. He whines for Secretary Gom and demands the man hand over a phone so he can make a call immediately. Taking the phone from the bodyguard, the boy casually greets his grandfather and asks if the filming situation is going smoothly, leaving the director standing nearby utterly speechless. Ito plays the victim with a tearful face. He sobs and complains over the phone that the adults here are really scary. Witnessing this tattletale act, director Ju and the film crew immediately fall into a state of extreme shock and panic. The boy suddenly retracts his fragile facade, replacing it with a sharp smirk as he coldly calls out director Ju's name. Ito casually holds up the connected phone, stating that his grandfather wants to speak to him directly. The young master's out-of-control audacity leaves both Rumin and Soil wide-eyed, with astonishment in their stupor. Director Ju's face suddenly turns ashen, drained of all blood. He stands rooted to the spot, as if he had just fallen into an abyss.